Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join us. Looks like we have a quorum. Devin, can you please take the roll for us, please?
Dr. Bolton,
Here.
Robert Brody,
Here.
Dr. Cow, Alex Chan,
Yes.
Kareem Gangora,
Yes.
Larry Kaplan, Paul Kramer,
Yes.
Alex Lawrence,
Here.
Esther Lynn, Justice Macy Walla,
Here.
Bethany Peak,
Here.
Ashley Silva Guzman,
Here.
Judge Reyna, Vince Reyes,
Here.
Alan Yokelson.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Devin.
All the way up.
So, as noted on the agenda for today's meeting, obviously we have a number of issues to discuss. But before we dive into the contents of the meeting, we're going to open up the floor for public comments. Public comments, as we noted, during the meeting will be limited. Members of the public who wish to make comments are highly encouraged to submit written comments prior to a meeting to ensure that the committee would have time to consider those comments. Now, the committee has received and read all the written public comments, so we thank you for all of you who have submitted your written comments. I personally have read every single one of them. With that, the committee coordinator, and here I believe Devin will now call members of the public in the order that they appear. And so to facilitate hearing as many members of the public as possible, I highly encourage the public members, public commenters, not to repeat points that were made by previous speakers. And with that, to allow the committee the time needed to deliberate on the very important topics that we'll discuss today, we'll be limiting public comments to, at least for 3 minutes per person. Obviously, if we have a lot of people who will be commenting, we may have to shrink it down to 2 minutes. Do we know, Devin, how many public commenters who wish to make comments today?
We currently have 4 members raising their hand to make public comment.
Okay, and I see a few extra hands raised among the attendees. Let's just stick with 3 minutes for now. If we have to shrink that down, we will, but I want to make sure that we have given the public enough time to make their comments. So with that, Devin, go ahead and let us know who has raised their hand so they can start speaking.
Our first public comment will be from Deborah Merritt.
Thank you very much. I am Deborah Merritt, and I hold the title of Distinguished University Professor at The Ohio State University. I am a national expert on both lawyer licensing and social science research. Drawing upon that expertise, I have consulted with NCBE on the next-gen exam and have worked pro bono with several states to improve their licensing processes. As an expert in this area, I fully support the state bar's proposals. If the bar cannot move the bar exam out of convention centers, it almost certainly will have to raise exam fees or bar dues. Taking the exam in convention centers is also expensive and inconvenient for test takers. They will benefit from taking the exam at test centers or remotely. As part of my work for other states, I have explored Kaplan's process for composing multiple choice questions. They have a well-developed professional method that meets or exceeds the methods used by NCBE. Kaplan relies upon full-time test developers who can easily create a high-quality exam by February. NCBE's process takes much longer because they rely upon volunteer committees that meet just twice a year. The Phase 1 experiment proposed by the State Bar, including the potential exam score adjustment, is fair to all candidates. The State Bar will either include all applicants or will choose randomly among them. The score adjustment, if the Supreme Court approves it, is not an unfair advantage to candidates who take part in the experiment. It is an adjustment that they earn by taking a longer bar exam and succeeding on it. Notably, the multiple choice section of the bar exam is not graded on a curve, so the point adjustment will not disadvantage other candidates. On the contrary, all candidates will benefit from taking a February exam that has been pre-tested. I am surprised, frankly, by the opposition to the State Bar's proposal. From my perspective, this proposal will reduce expenses and burdens for bar candidates while maintaining the integrity of the California bar exam and ensuring that your February exam proceeds smoothly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Merritt. Devin, who's next?
Our next public comment will be from Susan Bakshian.
Thank you. I'm Susan Bakshian. I'm a California attorney, a member of the Law School Council and Blue Ribbon Commission on the Future of the Bar Exam, and a professor at Loyola Law School. I recently submitted more complete written comments supporting the State Bar's exam reforms. I would like to make 3 points today. First, the timing. February is better than July for implementing changes. Fewer applicants take the February exam, allowing any issues with the testing centers or remote software to be resolved before the larger July exam. Second, regarding Kaplan's drafting and vetting process. As Professor Merritt noted, the National Conference of Bar Examiners process for drafting questions is not significantly different from California's plans. The NCBE committees meet twice a year, taking up to a year and a half to complete question reviews. The State Bar and Kaplan can prioritize this project, working full-time and meeting more frequently, making a shorter time frame feasible. And third, regarding fairness concerns. Critics of the experiment's fairness overlook many existing exam inequalities. For example, the ability to study full-time, seating proximity to restrooms, and affording a hotel during the exam all create advantages for some and not for others. In contrast, the experiment is the same for everyone, with a 40-point adjustment similar to the reread process for those close to a passing score. And only those who meet the standards will earn the points. Options such as the reread process and the experiment scoring adjustment are appropriate measures to provide a small level of protection for applicants who must wait 6 months to retake the exam, even when scoring close to the passing score. Finally, perhaps we should wonder why helping the State Bar meets with the critics' disdain. The State Bar is the professional organization that law students hope to join. We should encourage student participation and support of the State Bar, not degrade it. Thank you.
Thank you for the 3 points, Ms. Bakshian. Devin, who's next?
Our next public comment is from Benjamin.
Hello, good morning. I wanted to first make the point that I do believe that the vendor change should move forward at the February 2025 timeline, but I don't necessarily think it follows that the experiment is the best way to validate the exam questions, given some of the concerns raised in the letter by the law school deans. And even if an experiment is done, that it should be implemented exactly the way that it was initially petitioned for. The experiment's policy to have a grade change adjustment doesn't seem like an incentive that is the only thing that could motivate applicants to prepare for the test. And I certainly think that these other distortions may affect the performance or the preparation more than would the different incentives. It does sort of undermine the purported purpose of the exam, whether that's valid or not. The other aspect of the experiment is that the psychometricians apparently are already going to be doing quite a lot of analysis and comparisons to past data, and that was already factored into being making this change. Is it really necessary that they have this added data set, or could they do it from less direct means to avoid running into disrupting law school finals and some of the other problems that were with the fairness of the sample representation and how the conditions of this are set up? The next point that I wanted to make is that when a petition for this these changes to the bar exam is refiled, it should consolidate and make a firm recommendation to the California Supreme Court on the remote testing accommodations policy, including that it should be a bright line rule that the court should be asked to hold and make a condition of the change that all applicants who want to test remotely will be accommodated remotely, even if that means customizing the remote exam security systems to that individual's testing accommodations to implement that remotely. The only in-person testing accommodations should be those who request or prefer their testing accommodations to be administered in person. And there was forums held on that. I appreciate that there seemed to be some sentiment towards that bright line rule. I do think it should be in the petition. When you make the change in vendor to remote testing, that's a rule. Thank you.
Thank you for the 2 points, Mr. Cohn. Devin, who's next?
Our next public comment is from Phil Matthews.
Yes, hi, good morning. My name is Henry Marini, and I am here today to share my experience with you as somebody that has been a protester of Scientology for the last several months. Specifically, I'm here to address this board on issues of lawfare and the intentional abuse of the court system that Scientology attorney Kendrick Moxon, as well as Scientology and Jeffrey Epstein fixer and attorney Leah Safian, actively colluding to make the lives of anyone who dare be a public critic of Scientology an absolute nightmare. I've had guns pointed at my head. I've had fake swattings called on me. People are threatening to kill my dog and my family. There's a child predator by the name of Anthony D'Amato Jr. Specifically was stated that he feels emboldened to enact swatting calls and make death threats because he's working with Scientology counselor Kendrick Moxon. Other protesters have also been repeatedly swatted, have had guns pointed straight at their heads, who have also been threatened with lawfare and made to suffer at the hands of Scientology. We've already filed official complaints with the state bar to revoke Kendrick's law license as well as Leah Safian's law license. I'm just here today really to plead for your help. We've contacted every government agency there is out there. Scientology is a criminal organization. They traffic children, and they need to be stopped. Kendrick Moxon deserves to lose his law license. He's blatantly committed perjury on several counts. Leah Safian, similarly, has also committed perjury on several counts, just blatantly and egregiously. We're not really sure what else to do here other than continue showing up and making our voices be heard. I hope action will be taken by this honorable board before it's too late, before a protester or a child by the name of Solomon Sassoon, who has been swatted and sexually stalked by known Scientology affiliates who specifically feel emboldened because they have the support of Scientology counsel Kendrick Moxon. Please do your job. Make sure that this gets stopped before it's too late, before a child loses their life, before a protester loses their life. And it's within your grasp to do so. You're culpable now. This honorable committee knows so, and it's your responsibility to do your job and carry out due diligence. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Matthews. Just want to be clear, this board does not regulate attorneys, but nonetheless, I'm sure the staff has noted your comments.
Our next
Devin,
public,
who's next?
our next public comment is from Ray Hayden.
Hi, Ray Hayden here. While today's meeting is focused on specifics, I would like to mention the following. Those candidates who entered into the provisionally licensed lawyer program have become victims of good intentions. Somebody's necessarily fault there, just things happen. But those who have remained in good standing after all this time ought to be directly admitted to the California bar as long as they have met all the other requirements necessary, they truly have paid the price for admission. The California bar's experts have stated publicly that the written section of the exam fails to be indicative of success. that the written section has a detrimental effect on all takers, even those who pass, and that the written section is subjectively graded. Now, the first and second part above were part of the discussion on the first-year law student's examination in which the written section was dropped, yet they also apply directly to the California General Bar exam. The third part has been published in reports by the California Bar, and I've published examples of that numerous times. This very meeting, once public comments close and the meeting begins, is a good example that an hour or an hour and a half for the performance test to receive information, take appropriate action, fails to be indicative of the reality of the actual practice of law. A properly created multiple choice question examination covering information that newly licensed lawyer must know cold, which is honestly objective and fair, would be far more indicative of success because preparation for and passing of such an exam would add tremendous value to the exam itself, provide long-term benefits to the general public, California Bar, those who create educational materials, the entities who hire us, and the newly licensed lawyers entering the profession of law. And I don't think anybody can touch the comments by Merritt and Bakshian. They were amazing. Thank you for your time. Have a great meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Hayden. Next.
Our next public comment is from Claire.
Good morning. As several of you know, I've attended and participated in state bar meetings related to the attorney licensure for many years and have often shared public comment on behalf of the LSFN. Today, I'm speaking to address the history and rationale behind the changes to attorney licensure in California that are under consideration and suggest a pathway forward. I especially want these comments to be taken of note for the media and others who disparage the state bar by fixating on issues such as finances rather than the good work that the state bar is doing to try to ensure that new attorneys are properly licensed and well served. Recent day work to address reform dates all the way back to 2018 when the State Bar Board of Trustees created the CAPA Working Group. That group was charged with looking at the knowledge, skills, and abilities needed by entry-level attorneys in California to practice law ethically and competently. Following this, in 2020, the California Supreme Court adopted a charter for the Joint State Bar Blue Ribbon Commission, which worked hard to develop recommendations for the bar exam, as well as alternative pathways to licensure. All in, it's been 7 years since this work started. In recent years, the focus of the meetings has shifted to the state bar's finances. This should not be the focus. As noted by many others, the state bar's charge is to protect the public and ensure minimum competency. Unfortunately, over the past 4 years, the bar examinees have experienced additional costs and stress due to changes in the administration of the bar exam. They've endured increases in bar exam fees, as well as the reduction in test site venues that have resulted in additional incidental fees. It's important to recognize that the changes that are being considered today go along with many of the recommendations made by the Blue Ribbon Commission that will in fact improve the attorney licensure process. Since the Blue Ribbon Commission submitted its report to the state Supreme Court, we have seen many of our neighboring states, including Oregon, Washington, and Arizona, revise their licensure process, and Nevada is in the process of creating a 3-step attorney licensure, which would involve multiple choice exam given after the 3rd semester of law school, and has asked California to partner so that they can share the experience as well as the costs. Well-respected academics such as Professor Merrick and researchers have conducted numerous studies and written articles confirming alternative methods in licensure protect the public as well or better than the standard bar exam. The public has weighed in. They would like to see an alternative method of licensure. And ironically, by offering an alternative method of licensure, the state bar's costs will be reduced, as not only is it less costly to administer the PBE, but it will also result in fewer people taking the standard bar exam, creating much more flexibility in terms of venues and testing centers. Over a year ago, I addressed the Board of Trustees at its August meeting and asked them to look at the big picture rather than looking at each element individually. I encourage this group again to do so. It's time to refocus the state bar's efforts on the original 2020 directive. It is time for us to recognize that we have better ways to look at licensure, and we should do so. Finally, I reiterate the comments made by Mr. Hayden. It is time to resolve the 4-year plight that the PLLs have had to endure. They have proven their competency to practice law, and asking them to take yet another exam in 2025 makes no sense for them, their employers, and the clients who desperately need their services. I applaud the work the State Bar is doing to try to move forward, and I ask that it do so in a way that is respectful and that the media focuses on this rather than constantly looking at finances and assuming that this is the sole motivation of the State Bar. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire, for your comment regarding your support for alternative licensure. I don't think we will be discussing provisional licensure today, but I'm sure this is going to be the work of the CPE that will continue for the rest of the year. Devin, who's next?
Our next public comment is from Jacqueline Harani.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. My name is Jacqueline Harani, and I'm a former clinical law professor at Quinnipiac University School of Law, focusing on contracts and negotiations. I'm a practicing attorney that focuses on rooting out exploitation and oppression from contracts and business practices, and much of my work is pro bono or low bono. I'm here to speak in support of the transition of the California bar exam to allow for remote testing in the February session. This is something that is going to make a big impact for candidates in improving the diversity of our legal profession. I think it's really important that we allow remote not just as an accommodation as we have previously seen during the pandemic, but as a way of moving our legal field forward. This is going to help to address racial and economic injustice and will help to meaningfully improve not only the diversity of the profession, but the administration of justice for those most in need of advocacy. I really strongly encourage that if there is any media present as well, that they take into account and recognize the ways that this is something that is going to be supportive for candidates across the application for the California bar, because as I believe somebody has mentioned before in the previous records and notes from these meetings, the costs of travel, of the studying for the bar exam, staying at the hotel, all of these things add up and are an exclusionary mechanism that limit who is able to access or make the choice or decision of whether to apply or when to apply. So again, I strongly encourage everybody to focus on the way that this is going to help improve the diversity of our legal profession, and really appreciate everybody who's working to make this a reality for the February bar exam. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harani, for your comments regarding your support for the proposed modality. Devin, anyone else?
Our next public comment is from someone with the name Associate RSC Law Group.
My name is Tyler Gesbeck, and I am one of the 100 or so remaining provisionally licensed lawyers. As some of you may be aware, my son Leo was diagnosed with brain cancer 13 months ago. So he just finished his last round of chemo at the beginning of this year, and his last scan was clean. That said, he's not out of the woods, and our family has appointments all throughout the week, every week, because Leo is 18 months old and cannot walk. He is completely blind on his right side, has to get most of his calories through a gastric tube, and so far has no language whatsoever. He is also missing the entire back left side of his skull because the bone that was there was so badly degraded that it was resorbed by his body after surgery. When we got the diagnosis last year, I took maybe a week off from my clients. Even when we lived at the Ronald McDonald House in Palo Alto for 3 months, going back and forth to the hospital every single day, I continued to work remotely. As a provisionally licensed lawyer, I hold my clients' trust and confidence at every peril to myself. And I had to, because a child's cancer diagnosis was the worst news I had ever received. But a summons to family court is often the worst news my clients will ever receive. I could not take time off then, and I cannot take time off now for the bar. I have heard for about 5 months that a decision on the portfolio bar exam proposal will happen soon, And I know the bar is busy, but I ask that an update be provided to the provisionally licensed lawyers so that we can plan appropriately with our firms and our clients. My concern is that the provisionally licensed lawyer program sunsets, and the messaging to clients is that their attorneys were simply not minimally competent because they had not passed the bar by the sunset date. Thank you for all your hard work and take good care.
Thank you. My prayers go to you and Leah, and hopefully everything will work out fine. And I can assure you the committee will continue to work through all of the issues surrounding the provisional licensure diligently. And it's certainly one of the things that we'll continue to talk about for the rest of this administration. Devin, who's next?
Our next public comment is from Kenny.
Good morning. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to speak on I see a lot of these boards and they always asking like approval for money and this and that, but they're not worrying about the taxpayers' money that's being wasted on the false calls and the false swattings that's going on against the Scientology protesters. I've seen guns pulled to my friend's head and literally saw fear in his face that I can't get out of my head now. The mental anguish. The lawyer, Kendrick Moxon, using his law license and corruption pulls to harass and use the law against the protesters, which is costing tens and tens of thousands of dollars. They have to hire lawyers and go through the mental anguish of just not being able to function in life like a normal person because they're using the corruption. They don't act like they don't have to abide by the laws. They leave the planters on the easements like, and they was asked to move. They feel like they don't have to listen to anybody. And I'm asking y'all, pleading with y'all to please do something. They blocking public roads. They're making the access on to the ADA community just unaccessible. They can't even access it. They're going out their way to make it hard for people in wheelchairs to move around that place. It's sickening. Y'all need to really do something, please. They have people on the internet by the name of Anthony D'Amato Jr. ZDT is his YouTube channel that sexually stalks minor boys, their mothers, harasses women, sexually talk, just disgusting. And nobody seems to want to do anything about it. We've been calling, writing everybody that we can. And it seems like they can just do whatever they want and hire people to do dirty work. They've ruined protesters' cars, just hunt their families down and harass them through mail. It's sickening the stuff that they go to and they're allowed to do to punish people who just speak out against it. Scientology is a cult. Kids can't consent. It's a tunnel, folks. They have tunnels all around there that they use for human trafficking. I yield my time. Please help us. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Kenny. Devin?
Our next public comment is from Carla.
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much for receiving me. I want to thank you for your extreme concern and caring for the cost and the quality of the exam. We do want to have great professionals in the bar. And the reason why I'm calling is because we are desperate in many ways. I want to express my solidarity with Mr. Henry Marini. Right now, I see all this trouble that professionals are getting to get approved by the bar. And recently we've been seeing Mr. Scott Hochstadter has been defending himself and winning against a member of this bar who is Kendrick Moxon, because Kendrick Moxon has been presenting false accusations towards a bunch of protesters, a group of protesters who have exercised their First Amendment right to protest against the crimes that is committed by the Church of Scientology. And the reason why we're here is because we need to express our deep concern. Somebody needs to hear us. I am very worried about my friends being pointed, their guns at their heads, and we are thousands of people who are paying attention and raising money for different cases. This is not the only case. There are many, many cases that are bogus claims from not only Henry Maxim, but also Leah Safan and the city attorney Heidi Soto. And we know they are colluding with the Church of Scientology, and this is a terrible waste of money for the taxpayers. It's a waste of time for the court, and it's an abuse of the court system. And I would like to set it on the record, and so maybe some of you will pay attention, and we decide to be the hero in this story. And in the future, when very close future, when this situation is announced in the media, as it will be, you will be the ones who will be on the right side and not on the wrong side of the story. So I would like to thank you so much for hearing me. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Carla. Just as a reminder, this committee is not responsible, at least it's not tasked to regulate attorneys, but I'm sure the staff here will make a note of the comments. Devin, do we have anyone else? I see one more hand raised.
We have one more public comment from Audit LA.
Yes, good morning. I love to see you guys try to figure out how everyone, who wants to has a passion for the law, can become an attorney in ways that are more equitable and fair. I think that's great. But what I'm having an issue with is I'm going to be standing for the other people who, even if it's not the exact jurisdiction of this committee, it needs to be said. Okay, back in last November, I met two people who were trafficked and abused as children raised up in Scientology. It became a life passion of mine now because not only did I see there's so many people who have the same story, it doesn't vary, people have escaped, but I've gotten to see how corrupt they are, how their tentacles are just enmeshed in LA city government, including the city attorney. Okay, so and there's a lot of emails to show this. It's with the police, it's with public works, it's everything. When they have protesters, they don't want protesters. They put up all these like planners that are not ADA compliant. Doesn't matter how often you go to the city to beg them to make them compliant. They don't have to do it. It doesn't matter. Okay, they have people arrested for bogus stuff like removing just plastic trash thing lined up to keep people off the easement. Arrested. They demand that that person be arrested. Guess what? The city attorney arrested them. Imagine they're blocking the public easement. I can't get on. I'm in a chair. I can't use it. People can't get in and out of their cars. People can't walk their dogs. And then you're going to charge and arrest this person and then continue to do that. Even though they're across the country, they have to come back to LA for this bogus thing that nobody would ever be charged with. Or somebody charged, arrested, put in jail for using a bullhorn at a protest. Okay, and your and these lawyers, like Heidi Soto, okay, is compliant with this. It's abuse. It's lawfare, and it's abuse. And I don't care that she has the high level. She's appointed whatever by a mayor. We need the bar to intervene to make sure that your profession continues to have integrity. And how does it have integrity if the bar does not get in and monitor these abuses against the people who are just trying to protect people who were abused as children? We're trying to rescue children. These are many people with the testimony of being abused and trafficked by Scientology. We need your help to look into this. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Devin, do we have anyone else?
We do not.
On behalf of this committee, thank you again for all the public comments. With no additional commenters, we'll now move on to the open session. Now, for the first agendized item is item 1.1, which is consideration of an action approving modifications to the California Bar examination, starting with the February 2025 administration and to address the California Supreme Court September 18, 2024 order case number S286825, including vendors for question development and remote / in-person test center exam administration. Now, for this item, I would like to facilitate this very important meeting today by focusing on 3 specific areas. The first one is the Kaplan drafted multiple choice questions. The second one is the remote and in-person test center vendor measure learning, and also their ability to deliver a high quality experience. And lastly, other concerns related to the scaling and the scoring of the February 2025 bar exam and beyond. So with that, Audrey, would you mind starting us off with the first issue and describing the roadmap from here to the February bar exam?
No, thank you, Alex. I'm Audrey Ching, the Director of the Office of Admissions. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'm going to go through a very short presentation. Let me share my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Great. All right. So we've been meeting with stakeholders this whole year, stakeholders like the law schools and applicants, and hearing concerns. And in the past couple of weeks since the Board of Trustees meeting, I've been meeting with law schools one-on-one. We also had some group meetings. I had a group meeting with the ABA deans and with the Cal accredited deans just on Thursday. And these are some of the concerns that we're going to go through that Alex kind of just recapped already. So the time we have to prepare the questions, quality and the psychometrics, and then we're going to hear today from Measure Learning, the vendor, to deliver the remote exam and to use their in-person test centers. So let's talk about time. So just to back it up, I want to talk first about 2022. So in 2022, we came out of the pandemic exams and we returned to in-person administration. We returned to an entirely different landscape for in-person administration. The facilities, perhaps also to make up for all the losses they had over the pandemic, greatly increased their fees. We also had to increase what we were paying hourly for the proctors that we directly contract, and we had to pay increases for the temp agencies that we use when we cannot directly contract with proctors for our facilities. So the costs escalated when we came back to in-person administration. Because of this, we started exploring in 2022, talking to vendors about possibilities of having another vendor draft our multiple choice questions. We also began to, in that year, face a deficit problem in our admissions fund. You'll remember in 2023, we modeled for the committee multiple times possible ways to save money on the bar exam being the largest cost center for the admissions fund. We talked about administering the exam one day remotely because of our written questions, and then one day in person because of the restrictions on the current vendors' way that they only allow their questions to be administered in person. In the end of 23, we looked to instead reduce our physical sites, so have larger sites in fewer geographical areas. We also look to use our own state bar office and to look to law schools to pay less than what we were paying at hotel rooms for some of our accommodated applicants. And we also moved to increase the bar exam fees for attorney and non-attorney takers. And even with these changes, our finance department has predicted that the fund will be insolvent by 2026. So we need to make further changes. There's a dollar sign. This year, in January of 2024, we put out an RFI for a new vendor to produce multiple choice questions. We had a CBE discussion at our March meeting, and then at the April meeting of the committee recommended to the Board of Trustees to move forward with a new vendor. This is after multiple stakeholder meetings with law schools, and as one of the commenters mentioned, with applicants about moving to remote testing. This is also after post-exam surveys. We've been doing post-exam surveys for every bar exam since the pandemic. 75% or more of the applicants comment that they would like to have a remote test or test in small test centers instead of the standard testing sites we've been using. And in the last post-exam survey, we asked a different question, which does go to what one of our public commenters commented on, which was, how much money do you spend? Not bar prep fees, not the bar exam fees that we charge for applications, but how much money do you spend to even just come and take the test? And the majority of respondents said they spend between $500 and $1,000 just to come to one of our sites and take the test. And this is something that is a real benefit to moving to a remote administration or a test center administration, because folks don't have to travel to a few sites in California to take our bar exam, and they can save money that places a lot of additional stress on applicants, even just for test day. So you'll remember we had an agendized item in the May meeting of the Board of Trustees about the Kaplan developed questions that was pulled. We then brought that back in the July meeting of the Board of Trustees, signed a contract with Kaplan in August. And because of that being signed, we had the contract signed. We're also able to move forward with talking about a new way to deliver the exam. So that's sort of the high level overview of the past couple years. So let's talk about a more macro timeline to February 2025. This is September, the last day of September. We had a board meeting this month, and the Board of Trustees moved for us to be able to begin contract negotiations with Measure Learning. We have a CBE meeting right now. It's happening 9:30. We had a last order from the Supreme Court post-pandemic about the bar exam. In that order, it states that we give an in-person exam and that we use the National Conference's multi-state bar exam questions. So we do need another order from the court to proceed with these changes, and that's what we're talking about today. September 13th, we also opened an application for what we're calling phase 1 of the bar exam experiment to pre-test the Kaplan drafted questions. We have a web page, we have FAQs posted. We're also doing ongoing content validation of the multiple choice questions, and this is going to be across this timeline. And we've talked about this before with the CBE, with our psychometrician, but just a reminder, content validation. So we will receive drafts, batches of questions, drafted questions from Kaplan, and we convene panels that meet over the weekend. Those panels have our psychometricians, recently admitted attorneys, supervisors of recently admitted attorneys, law school faculty. So these panels take the questions and they review them. Does this test minimum competence? Is the question clearly written? Does the question have any bias? Is it testing the legal subject area? Suggest edits, and then that goes back to the vendor to make those edits so we can prepare questions for our item bank. October, right around the corner. Hope to resubmit the petition to the Supreme Court so we can proceed with the February 2025 bar exam as planned. We'll have a free faculty guide for the multiple choice questions, not just with sample questions, but lots of annotated information about the correct answers and the incorrect answers. The February bar exam application will open. We will, of course, have a very robust FAQ document for applicants to read through. We have lots of cues, so we will make sure we answer all those questions that people have. They can read through. Obviously, there's also lots of calls and emails that we will answer about concerns. We will have Q&A sessions this week with law schools and applicants about the changes to the February exam and about the bar exam experiment. Again, every month we're doing ongoing content validation of those drafts of questions, those batches that come to us, and the panels meeting over the weekend. We're also hoping to start building out the exam on this new exam platform. In November, we'll have a study guide available for students. It's possible we can move that timeline up into October. That's what we're working on, but for now, we'll leave it there. We're also having that pre-test of multiple choice questions, November 8th, and now we've added Saturday, November 9th on the Measure Learning platform. We did have concerns about the November 8th date. It's a weekday, it's a Friday, so making sure that people could also test on a Saturday when maybe they have more flexibility with their work schedule. Also, some of the folks who wanted to take the pre-test had the MPR rescheduled on either the 7th or 8th, so we've opened up the Saturday, the 9th as well. As soon as we opened the application on September 13th, we had a lot of interest, and to date, we have over 3,000 applications received. At this point, we do not need to limit any participation in that pretest. Again, in November, ongoing content validation of the multiple choice questions. December, you know you have your regularly scheduled meeting. I leave this on the timeline because that Saturday, the attorney members meet with our exam development and grading team to go over the written questions for the February 2025 bar exam. Something important to remember that we also select questions for the written day as well. Ongoing content validation of the multiple choice questions. We begin QA to make sure the questions are edited correctly and are able to be loaded into the item bank. In January, we will have the ability for applicants to start scheduling practice exams or to go visit those test centers. It'll be important for them to do this so they can test out the features and see how different aspects of the exam will look, especially I know of concern is the performance test. Ongoing content validation of the multiple choice questions, and then finalizing that item bank for February. We've been doing countdown emails to applicants since the pandemic exams. We send them every Friday, 6 weeks before. So technically that bullet is a little more in January, but you understand. We also send those Friday emails out to all the law schools so everyone's on the same page. Important information, what you need to know, what are the minimum system requirements for your device if you're testing remotely, when can you start scheduling that practice exam, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of reminders, lots of communication with applicants. The exam will be delivered February 25th and 26th, unless you are approved for extra time. So this is the roadmap to the February bar exam. Just to go over some of the concerns again, with our current vendor, yes, they have a multi-year process. You heard a couple of comments already this morning about that process. The process is a multi-year process because they meet with the committee semi-annually. They only meet twice a year. So it's nothing against the process, it's just using time differently. So we are meeting with our committees every few weeks to validate the questions. It's just a different time frame with the current vendor. And to remind you, this exam, the multiple choice exam, the multi-state bar exam has changed significantly over time, many, many times. It began in 1972. Actually, California was one of the 11 jurisdictions to be on board with that in 1972, and it tested 5 subjects. In 1975, constitutional law was added. That was a big change. Equating change in 2005 from linear to item response theory. Now, I know our psychometrician will be on with us, so he could understand this more than I, but from a psychometric standpoint, as I understand, that is a big change to a test. Pre-testing of the questions did not even begin until 2007. So from 1972 to 2007, there was no pre-testing. Pre-testing, to remind you, is what we're doing on November 8th and 9th with the drafted questions in our phase 1 experimental exam. And it began with 10 questions, so 190 scored and 10 pre-tested. The NCBE didn't take over fully test development of the multiple choice questions until 2009. It began in 1972. Test development grading with ETS and then ACT, and then they fully took over test development from ACT in 2009. So from 1972 to 2009, there were different vendors involved with that test. Civil procedure, the 7th subject, was not even added to the multiple choice test until 2015. In 2017, they started pretesting more questions. So 175 scored and 25 pretested. That is a significant change. And I probably don't need to remind you because I know we've talked about it at this committee. The multiple choice test as it is, the MBE, is set to sunset in 2028. They are changing the exam entirely. So this question is posed to us for many different reasons about changing vendors for the multiple choice test. And it's just some reminders. That was all I had on timeline. Any questions for me?
Hi, Audrey. I have a couple of questions here. I'm just looking at the implementation timeline for the February 2025 bar exam. Now, in November, I think we have the pretest of the multiple choices schedule for November 8th and 9th.
That's right.
And then we also have in January of next year, where applicants can now start scheduling practice exams. My question is, and I've seen quite a few comments, written comments about, some ongoing concerns in the context of not making these practice exams earlier, right? I think it's entirely understandable, at least for a lot of the applicants and students who are really not facing, not only, studying for the bar exam, but there are a lot of uncertainties as far as what's going to be on the exam. The content hasn't changed, but I think in terms of format, I think it's important for us to see if there's any way for us to, make those practice exams earlier than November and January. But I wanted to see, what effort is being made in terms of getting these materials out to the public and to applicants sooner rather than later.
So about the platform itself and how it will look and feel. I think we can do a lot sooner in terms of screenshots, videos. It's possible, and we have our vendor on, that as soon as someone is approved and made eligible for the exam, they can start scheduling practice exams earlier. So that's something we can work out. We're also that 8th and 9th test is on the platform. So anyone who is in that group will be able to test out the platform. But for the practice exams, we want not just to have multiple choice, but have folks practicing the written questions too, so they can see how to highlight and copy and paste. But I think we'll be able to put a lot of information out ahead of time about how it'll look and how you'll be able to go through the written and multiple choice questions.
So is the January timeline? And by the way, I don't know if we have any dates set as far as when we would be able to schedule those practice exams. Do we have a date certain, or is this?
No, so
still
I'm saying January because of our own timely filing deadline. So when we have our own deadlines for the application, I mean, I think we can work with the vendor in terms of when someone's eligible, giving them the ability to schedule a practice exam early. That's a question that we would have to work out with the vendor, but I don't think it's a bad idea to try to get earlier exposure.
Because we don't really care about the contents, but just making sure the applicants understand, look at the feel, and get them used to the interfaces so that there are no surprises on the day of the exam. So because of that, unless I'm missing something, I do think it is probably possible to make this available earlier than January. Because again, because of the holidays, because about a study time period, I want to make sure that we really make this available earlier and sooner than January, if at all possible.
Okay, thank you. I think we should take that away and try to make that happen.
Alex, I would say that there will be some who will want to also practice questions themselves. And this would be the best way to deliver that. I have a different question or a variation on that. So in November, are we going to, is it going to be 200 questions that are going to be pre-tested?
No, it's not 200. It'll be 49.
Okay, so that's a subset of the, and how many, when we come to the point where we can pick the questions for the exam, how many questions will be in the bank? Just 200 or somewhat more than that?
It'll be more than that, but because we're going through the process of receiving the batches and making them ready for the bank, I don't know the exact number because some of the questions won't be ready for the bank initially, right? They'll need more drafting, but it'll be more than 200.
Okay, because otherwise I'm worried that the students are seeing the bulk of the questions ahead of time and what that says for exam security.
No, then that won't be the case in terms of the pretest.
Okay, I'm going to have a lot more questions, but I kind of wanted to see how the presentations play out first.
Okay, thanks, Paul.
Any other comments from the CBE? Hearing none, Audrey, maybe this is a good time to invite Dr. Chet Bunkenthal, our second magician, to explain how scaling and scoring works for the bar exam, and also how it will work in a valid and reliable way for the February bar exam.
Chad.
Thanks, Alex. And oh yeah, sorry, I'm Audrey. I'm here.
Here you are.
And you did just fine talking about IRT in that history.
Oh, thanks. It is a big change in terms of equating, right? I mean,
It is, yeah. It's more of a nerd change, though. Alex, thanks for the opportunity to talk about the sort of scaling and equating process. So for the February examination, because California Bar has used the MBE as the link, essentially the common information that carries over your passing standard from one exam to the next for a number of years, by replacing the multiple choice portion of the exam the program is going to be resetting its baseline in terms of the underlying score that constitutes passing for the exam. And what that means is in 2017, the State Bar did a standard setting activity to establish the passing score or to evaluate the passing score for the examination. That value then that came out of that process was then scaled, meaning transformed. So we transformed that recommendation into the, I think it was a 1420 at the time, I believe, that has since been adjusted to a 1390 is, I believe, the current scale score that is used as the reported passing score. When examinations are built, each time they're built, as much as the goal is to build something statistically to be identical to the previous exam, because there is variability with each California Bar administration due predominantly to the written portion of the test that is new every exam, but also because of variation in some of the questions on the multiple choice portion of the exam. So as new questions are kind of brought into the operational use, the ability to produce an identical version statistically doesn't happen. There's usually like small variation in what those multiple choice scores are when new questions are introduced each time. And so what that means is the process of equating ultimately means that you want to ensure that new forms of the tests are brought back to or connected to the form of the test on which you're setting that passing score, so that the meaning of the passing score doesn't change over time. You don't want applicants to have their performance is not relevant, or sorry, their performance is not relative to the performance of other applicants. Their performance is relative to the actual criterion passing score that is established for the test. And so what that means for the February exam is you will be establishing a new baseline for what we call the raw score. You think of the raw score as just kind of like the number of points that somebody gets on the examination. Once that passing score is set, that becomes a base form or kind of the anchor against which we then equate future test forms. So when there is variation in the July examination, because again, we know that the test population isn't the same as the February exam, and each time a new form of the test is introduced, it's going to be slightly different in terms of the statistical properties. And so equating allows you, again, to kind of preserve that meaning of the passing score once it's established. For the February exam, because of the relationship to the experiment that's been talked about, it's important to remember that any sort of incentives or activities associated with participation in the experiment, either during November of 2024 or the planned experiment in July of 2025, will have no effect on the statistical properties of the questions for the test or the equating and scaling processes going forward. And that's because any type of policy-driven adjustment that may occur for participants in the experiment occurs after the bar goes through its normal scoring, analysis, scaling, and equating activities that have nothing to do with participation in the experiment. Because if you were to kind of factor that in to that scoring process, it would create this sort of like artificial shift for people who participated in the experiments, and would change total scores for probably a small number of people, but would have no effect on the actual statistical characteristics of the questions themselves. Those questions, if they're answered correctly by a certain proportion of the applicants, become essentially those anchor values for each of those questions. And that's what we want to preserve. So if you think about it as kind of the standard operating procedure for the February exam, the bar is engaging in its standard operating procedure for everything with the exception of being unable to use the MBE as the equating block or the common information that is used to connect the state's passing score from from prior exams to the current exam. For that, you'll be establishing a new passing score that is associated with that kind of new base form of the test. That passing score then will be scaled back to your 1390. So the interpretation of the passing score doesn't change because you can always scale it. So it's very similar to doing a transformation between, say, like an imperial system, like inches, to a metric system, centimeters, right? So I can convert inches to centimeters, centimeters to inches, and all we're doing is a transformation of the scale. For the examination, the transformation of the raw passing score, or just that number correct on a base form of the test, is transformed or scaled to the interpretive scale on which that 1390 is the kind of the reported passing score. And that is held constant so as not to confuse people about, what the meaning of the passing score is. That remains stable over time. And so, Alex, I recognize that there's a lot of stuff there and there's probably some questions, but from an equating and scaling standpoint, just the two highlights are new baseline established in February. Future exams will be equated to that, and the experiment and any sort of incentives for participation will have no effect on the underlying statistical properties of those questions or scaling and equating going forward.
Question. So the transformation to me right now appears to be a black box, and I would like you to open that box and explain how that works. One of my biggest concerns about all this is that we are perhaps undertaking, not intentionally, but inadvertently, we will have the effect of changing the cut score. And, our story to the world is that the score we've established is the appropriate place to sort among potential lawyers and decide which should be allowed to go forward and represent the people in our state in their serious business and which should not. So I need to get comfortable about how you're able to equate the old and the new. And so far, this business about panels of new lawyers, those supervising new lawyers, and someone else, and psychometricians, isn't getting me there.
So thanks for the question. And I think there are two different components that you may be talking about. So the panels that are currently involved in the content validation that Audrey spoke to, their role is essentially to be independent evaluators of the content that's being produced by your test vendor Kaplan. And meaning before those questions show up on the February exam, the state bar wants to know, are those questions accurate, meaning accurate with respect to the law? Do they map to something that is within the content map that has been published as the sort of blueprint, meaning these are the sorts of things that are in bounds for measurement on the test? 3, is it written to a level that is appropriate for entry-level attorneys? And 4, is the question free from bias or things that would cause groups of applicants to potentially be advantaged or disadvantaged on the question? So that's the content validation piece as a precursor to anything that has to do then with setting the passing score.
Okay, and I'm good with that.
Okay.
It's to the extent that that is suggested as somehow getting us to the equating function, which I'm mostly concerned about. I just don't see that. And I think you may be telling me that it really doesn't relate to that.
Correct. The content validation doesn't get us to the equating function. So for the February examination, the standard setting process that would then need to occur, because now you have, for each examination, essentially half the examination is kind of unknown in terms of the statistical properties. Because, and what I mean by that is the written examination, the written portion of the exam, the essays and the PT question, those are always new. And so even if they are kind of content validated before, you don't know how they function until you administer them and get the statistics for those questions. So normally the MBE, or historically, the MBE has been used as kind of the common piece of information that links us from one exam to the next, because we know those statistical properties, because those questions have kind of been calibrated or analyzed and put on a scale that remains constant. That's that item response theory thing that Audrey mentioned. However, for the February 2025 exam, the entire exam is essentially going to be new, meaning all the questions, multiple choice and written, we are not going to know completely all the statistical properties of those questions. So because of that, we will need to go through a standard setting process. That standard setting process is informed by separately a panel of what we call subject matter experts, which are people who are entry-level practicing attorneys, people who supervise them, people who have familiarity with people who are just entering the field, and making judgments on the multiple choice questions and the essay questions to make a recommendation for what the passing score should be, applying the same descriptor of minimal qualifications that was used to establish the passing score in 2017. In addition, some of the information that can be shared. So that's kind of like, we call that kind of what we call a test-centered method, because they're making judgments interpreting the policy definition of minimum competency as applied to the characteristics of that test and how easy or difficult it is. Because what we don't know yet is we don't know if the exam that's given in February is easier than the one given in July or February of 2023, or is it more difficult? Because we don't have the data yet to know how those questions will function. However, we do know historically how applicants on the February exam have performed and how applicants on the July exams have performed. So as part of the policy deliberation process, in addition to those panelists' recommendations, along with the empirical information, the statistical information from that February exam, we will be able to use the information historically to kind of know, well, what is that upper and lower bound of range, so that we are not dramatically diverging from what is a reasonable expectation that the state has set with respect to expectations for minimal competence. So it's not that we're doing this kind of with a blank slate. We do have historical information, but we also kind of need to go through this process systematically to also evaluate the ease or difficulty of this test relative to what we knew we had previously. And so it's not equating yet at that point, because we're establishing a new baseline with the 2025 exam. The equating then doesn't occur until the July 2025 exam, where we then take that passing score that is established for the February 2025 and use then as the anchor point to then do equating for the new exam that is then administered in 2025. All of that occurs on a numerical metric that is, like, the easiest way to describe it is, there's a certain number of points associated with the combination of multiple choice, of essay, of PT questions, and how many points an applicant gets to pass has a certain meaning for the February exam. That is then scaled to the interpretive scale to make sure that the multiple choice portion and the written portion are weighted 50-50, so that there's not, if there are, more points associated with one component than the other, you want to be able to balance that so that each component is contributing in the weight that has been approved for the exam. That scaling process then, the scaling process is then the transformation of that simple sort of raw number of points directly to your interpretive scale. That interpretive scale is the one on which 1390 has been established as the passing score. So to go through the sort of machinations to get to the process of saying, what does minimum competency mean now on this test? Because we don't have anything to link it to previous. That passing score then gets scaled, transformed to the interpretive scale in order to again preserve the sort of longitudinal meaning, so that 1390 still means a 1390 and it is still anchored to the minimal qualifications expected for an applicant.
So to get back to that base score, are you working backwards from average pass rates? It sounds like you are.
Well, so one of the equating processes that can be used, I'm actually not recommending it, and I'll explain why, but it's called equipercentile equating. And what that means is, if I were to look at February of 23, February of 22, and kind of go back to a bunch of February exams and say, okay, well, what's the average passing rate for those exams? I can then look at that average rate, look at that in the distribution of scores for the February 2025 exam, to then match those up to say, okay, well, if the passing rate is X, what's the score on the February 2025 exam associated with that pass rate? However, that sort of normative approach is not recommended in professional standards, and it in a way predefines how many people then pass the exam. That historical information does give us some information for kind of an upper and lower bound of what applicants have done on prior February exams. But because this exam that is going to be administered in February 25 is brand new, we don't know how applicants are going to perform on it. And so to kind of predefine a particular pass rate would not, probably wouldn't be fair, because we are then kind of predetermining a certain pass rate without knowing how easy or difficult the test is relative to that definition of performance. Yet, from a policy perspective, policymakers are free to look at external evidence being historical pass rates from other jurisdictions. Those are the sorts of things so that when a committee comes out of a standard setting study, they are often recommending a pass rate, but because it's not unanimous, there's usually a margin of error around that recommendation that's plus or minus a few points. That sort of margin of error is where the policy body then needs to factor in the other sorts of policy considerations in order to make the final determination. So it is not as standard setting, and the process of setting a passing score is an integration of policy and content and statistics. And so those are, three things that kind of exist on different planes. And so it's not as easy as saying, well, this is the passing score. You can do that with that equipercentile equating method, but because it's norm referenced, as opposed to a criterion reference decision, it's like the psychometric community through our professional standards, our, canon of ethics recommends that for licensure and certification examinations, that the decision ultimately be criterion referenced, informed by policy and content and data.
Okay, the goal here is to make the new questions of equal difficulty to the old ones, correct?
Well, the goal is to make sure that the content representation is equivalent to the existing content representation. The vendor is, you would not want to put pressure on the vendor to try to match these statistical properties because those are not public information. To my knowledge, NCBE has never released information about individual item level statistics to be able to try to have somebody try to replicate or create that. The goal is for the vendor to produce questions that fall within an acceptable tolerance of questions that would function well on the exam, meaning that the questions would be answered correctly from a range of about 30% correct to about 85% correct. So that's kind of the range. You don't want questions that are too difficult that everybody's getting them wrong or having to guess. You don't want questions that are so easy that they're not helping you make that determination of whether or not somebody is minimally qualified or not.
Final question. So if we had not denied ourselves the luxury of time to do so, would it have been useful to test the new questions alongside with using the MCBE questions, and then we could have used the MCBE data to calibrate our new multiple choice questions?
I think probably in an ideal world, if all parties would have been amenable to that, that would have been a probably an ideal study design to be able to integrate questions from California into the MBE. Again, I don't know anything about contract relationships or whether or not that would have been even feasible to do, but from kind of a pure research study design, it's always nice to be able to have questions that are evaluated in an operational setting by motivated applicants for which there is no potential use of those questions operationally until you need to use them.
I'm sorry, one more. So over time, if we go forward with this, you will tweak the calibrations for each new exam for a while, right? In July, you won't feel bound absolutely by what was determined in February. You'll have more data, and so you'll probably at least want to consider reviewing whether the base number is still the best number.
Yes. Well, and in fact, what happens is because that July exam, the range of scores that are produced by the applicants are going to be different. And so, and I think it's fair to say, like almost all large scale testing programs will use equating processes that rely on common items. So there are common items that are embedded in tests that give us that sort of that link, that piece to allow us to carry from exam to exam to do the equating. Now, statistically, item response theory, there are some ways to kind of manage that without it, but it's much easier to have some common items because then I have something that's kind of a known property that I had on a prior exam to a new exam. But in terms of that sort of tweaking, yes, as the question pool is built out by the bar, my sense is for the first few exams, that tweaking process as new data are gathered and you get ultimately to a more representative population of examinees, those will start to become very stable over time. And that's again where that item response theory methodology helps a little bit, because it is, in theory, it's sample independent. You still need data to estimate the statistical properties of the questions, but they tend to then result in more stable estimates of the question performance than something that is the kind of historical, what we call classical test theory, that is sample dependent, where the difficulty of the questions relies very heavily on who's taking the question.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Punkdal. I have a couple of questions for you. I know we talked about the panel of subject matter experts. Maybe Audrey, if you can shed some light on this panel. Have we selected this panel? Because I know nothing about this panel.
It's panels, and we have one this weekend. We have several coming up. We will have later on in the year, from my timeline, as you saw, the need for more panels and perhaps more panel members. And we have been asking members of the committee for referrals for the panel as well.
And would any of the CBE members be able to participate either as a spectator or as a participant in any of these panels? Obviously, we have a lot of attorney members, but I want to see if it's even possible for any of the members to participate, to the extent any such member is interested in participating.
Yeah, I think that's. I'm trying to remember, Amy, if Ashley, you can tell if you are going to participate in one of the panels, or maybe you just gave us a referral. But yes, I think that is possible.
Okay. Two more questions. I see hand raised for the LA Bar office. I wanted to talk to you quickly, Dr. Chunkaba. Buckendall. So the one question I think you talked about is the NCBE, where we could potentially test their questions a lot alongside ours. Perhaps, Paul, I think, this is a good idea. The only potential issue is that, NCBE's questions are, in 200 question in length. And if we were to test ours alongside theirs, I think potentially we would run into the question of selecting and then removing some of those questions or NCBE questions, and then we place it in with ours. I don't know how that would work. Not to mention, I'm not even sure the NCBE would allow us to do that, other than just to extend the length of the multiple choices. But then again, that would spell trouble as soon as you go over 100 question on the first half as well as the second half. So I don't really know how that would work. But also another question that I wanted to be very clear about: we're not changing the content. In terms of the essays, the topics remain the same. It's just that the modality is different, at least for the essay portion. And then for the multiple choices, we're also not changing the content, in the sense that we're still testing on the same topics. We're not suddenly now grabbing a new topic and introducing it in the February bar exam. Instead, I think we are just reformatting, redesigning the questions. And to that extent, Chad, can you help me understand at least how the essay question would be impacted versus the multiple choices? Because again, my understanding is the essays are not being impacted as much as the multiple choices, right? Because it's not like we're having a new design team designing the essays, or at least at a minimum, I think our edge team will still be very much involved in writing and drafting the essay portions, or at least is not contributing heavily. So explain to me, whether there's a difference in terms of how you evaluate the essays versus the multiple choices. Again, this is in the context of scaling and equating the blocks.
Sure. And so you're correct that only the multiple choice portion of the exam is changing. The essay questions, the PT question that's on forms of the examination. So that half of the examination continues to function exactly as it has now for a number of years. Because the multiple choice portion of the exam has for a number of years been used as that common link to do the equating and scaling for the written examination, by changing the multiple choice portion of the test, it kind of It doesn't allow you to do that. And so you can't do it for the February 2025 exam, because now in the February 2025 exam, there is nothing common. The multiple choice questions are new, and we already are stipulating that the essay and PT question is new. And because of the potential variability and again, the essay and PT question is those are human scored. And so the difficulty of those questions varies a little bit more than those multiple choice questions over a longer period of time. So in terms of there is no equating process that occurs or that will occur for the February 2025 exam where we're using the multiple choice to link the written questions. However, if there are multiple forms of the test, so one of the questions I think, Paul, I think it was you that kind of recognized the potential security and confidentiality risk of using questions from any sort of experiment that occurs in November to gather data on the February exam. Clearly, we're concerned about that as well. And so if multiple forms of the test are created, then what would occur is that a passing score would be established on one of those forms to then be used to equate to the other form. So if there are two forms of the test, a passing score would be established on one to then use to equate the second one, so that you, again, are preserving the meaning of the cut score across different forms of the test. Right now, when the exam is, the way the exam has been historically administered, because everybody's taking the exam the same day, it's, they're only using equating to equate the MBE first. And so that's the first equating that occurs, MBE. And then there's a scaling process that scales the written portion using the MBE as that sort of common link from prior examinations. And so for February, although we are not equating back to any particular base form of the test, for multiple forms that may be administered, you are equating across those forms of the test within the February 2025 exam.
Thank you. LA office?
No, go ahead.
You sure?
Actually, I had my question answered.
Okay.
Ashley's got a question.
Perfect. Robbie, do you have any questions before?
I don't, not yet.
Okay. Maybe my question is better suited for towards the end of this, but I have questions regarding the form of the question. So not sure if that is a now question or a later question.
I'd say
There's only one way to find out.
yeah.
Okay. So I know that obviously with these new Kaplan-based questions, what we're getting is, maybe the however many test questions that we'll be releasing to prospective testers. But what does that look like, and how different can these questions look from the NCB questions that have been previously produced, and what does that look like for our students' practice, right? Because if we're looking at these kind of providers like UWorld, Quimby, AdaptABar, who provide hundreds of these multiple choice questions, are those going to look entirely different, or is it something where it's not going to look that different and students can still have the time to study using these outside programs or whatever they might want to use, or other questions? Because I know that we had, the reason why this is coming up for me is that I know we had the question about Kaplan and the cease and desist with the NCBE. So I wanted to know what that looks like and how close that can look.
So I can speak to it from kind of a psychometric structural standpoint, and then I'd like to invite Audrey to speak about the sort of substantive guidelines that are part of the vendor service level agreement. If Audrey, if you can speak to that, because okay, thanks. Because I'm not aware of that. So from kind of a structural, or what we call just good practices in writing questions, a a 4-option response, single response, multiple choice question will have a, kind of a brief scenario with a single measurement target associated with it. There will be 4 options, meaning 4 potential response choices, A, B, C, D. There'll be 1 keyed response, that is the best response for responding to the scenario, and that the alternative responses that we call distractors or foils, that those are designed in such a way that they represent common but incorrect, common errors, but clearly incorrect for the purposes of that particular question. And so, again, scenario with the appropriate information necessary, targeting kind of a single measurement target that is mapped to something that is within the content map, and then meets those review criteria that we talked about earlier about, bias-free, targeting appropriate level, right? Because you don't want to write questions that are so ridiculously obscure that are inconsistent with what you would expect from entry-level practice. But it should match something in that content map. And so structurally, there are textbooks, multiple textbooks written about how to develop a multiple choice question. And those kind of structural elements are pretty consistent, whether it is what NCBE is doing, whether it is what California has done for decades with its first-year law student exam, or what anybody building out single answer 4-option response, multiple choice. Substantively, Audrey, if you want to speak to what the sort of guidelines you provided to the vendor for this.
Thank you for queuing me up. So I also sent the committee a copy of the contract so you can read through it on your own time. But what's in there is that there will be no modification to the way that someone trains and prepares for these questions. So when you were describing it, Ashley, and your descriptor about how someone might be prepping, it was the latter. So they're using still the bar prep materials they have. There's not going to be any different way to train or prepare for these questions. The NCBE is not saying that it owns the right to the multiple choice format, the way that Chad was just describing on the multi-state bar exam. So the way that those questions, those multiple choice questions with the call to the question and the 4 answers, those kinds of fact patterns, that's not something that they were contending was at issue. So I don't think between Chad's answer and mine, I think the answer is that the people will be studying and that the questions on the multiple choice questions and people will get to see previews, right? We're releasing 2 study guides. We're having a pre-test. People will see the previews and be able to see that the questions are going to be in a manner such that they don't have to train or prepare differently.
And then
Audrey,
sorry, I
Go
had
ahead.
a separate question as well, or a similar question. I think I vaguely recall that there was also some sort of agreement with Kaplan that they wouldn't be providing that bar prep process so that it wasn't unfair to other people. And so I wasn't sure if that was something that was guaranteed, written into the contract, or if that was something that we have to still discuss and figure out. Just because I know that Kaplan provides their own bar prep program, and then they also provide access to what's similar to like a UWorld or Adopt a Bar, where it's their own multiple choice bank, but I think it's probably going to be closer to what NCBE produces since that's what's being used now. So I wasn't sure if what that looks like in practice.
So that is in the contract that they will exit the retail bar prep business in California.
Okay. Do we know when?
It's actually, I think, October 5th, so that's tomorrow.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Wow.
Audrey, question for you. I just wanted to make sure we have a clear answer. So what are we doing, if anything, that is different from what NCB did in the past in terms of drafting? Because I think obviously we talked about a lot of similarities, but I wanted to see if there's anything that's different. But I think the CB would benefit from knowing, any such differences.
The drafted questions are coming from Kaplan, and in the NCBE process, from what I understand, reading their issues of Bar Examiner and how that's how I kind of put my slides together. They have drafting committees, so they have people whose full-time jobs are not writing questions, judges or law school faculty. They have drafting committees that draft questions, and then there's full-time staff, I think, that helps with editing, and then they have these semi-annual committee meetings. So the raw materials, right? Or it's actually kind of similar to what we do with the written questions, where we get drafted questions from law school faculty, and then the EDGE team meets to edit and improve them for the item banks. So we're getting raw materials for drafted questions from Kaplan that we're going through content validation. And I think the NCBE raw materials are coming from volunteer writers that they go through a process of editing and content validation. So it's a different, perhaps original source.
Got it. Now, in terms of the multiple choices, I took the bar exam a while ago, and I certainly remembered experimental questions. And I know NCBE does have certain number of questions that are experimental in nature, meaning they don't really count towards your final score. Are we doing anything like this? And if so, how many experimental questions are we planning on having on the February bar exam?
So, I mean, and again, in my research for today, the NCBE never used to pre-test questions, but they did start pre-testing questions in 2007. They started pre-testing 10, and then they changed to 25 in 2017, which means 175 are scored and 25 are pre-test. We are doing a pre-test on November 8th and 9th of 49 of the multiple choice questions. So we are pre-testing the questions, and then in that first iteration, as Chad described, it's not exactly going to be a pretest because we're looking at the scoring in a different way. Anytime you have something new on an exam, you're looking at the scoring, scaling, and equating in a different way. Same thing with next gen. When they start in 26, they're going to have, no data on things that are brand new, right? So that won't be the case. But as we go to future iterations of the exam, we can do pre-testing operationally, which means that some items are scored and some items are not scored.
Thank you.
And I think just to extend on Audrey's comment there a little bit, so the February exam for the multiple choice, there will be 200 questions on there. And so what that means is there will be 25 scored questions for each of the 7 subject areas, just like kind of the current examination that's being given. There will be an additional 25 questions on the exam for a couple of reasons. One, any opportunity, well, again, not wanting to change the length or structure of the exam, but I think also because that opportunity to get information on questions from a motivated pool of applicants who are then going to help you build that question bank out is always helpful. But for the February exam, it also serves an additional purpose. Similar to other examinations, I don't know how NCBE handles this, but for other larger scale testing programs, they will put those embedded field test or pre-test questions on, also potentially for the purpose of being able to use it as a replacement question if one of the questions that they intended to be scored doesn't function well. So let's just say, as a pure example, that one of the contracts questions doesn't function well, meaning it doesn't fall kind of within that range of difficulty that I noted, or it doesn't meet some of the kind of the predictive relationships that we expect that question to have with the total score. And we see that there's another contracts question that we originally intended to be unscored, but actually functions better than the one that we did intend to score. That can be substituted in that sort of environment to ensure that you still have 25 questions that meet your content specifications and meet the statistical properties to ensure the highest reliability of both the score and ultimately of the decision that you're making for the applicant.
Thank you. Very helpful. Any comments from any member of the committee?
Is the hand still raised in LA? Sorry. No? No. Okay.
And Audrey, my understanding
Hold
is.
on, Brody. Ashley has one more.
Just a minor question. I know that we previously had discussed that students or testers can visit the sites that they'll be going to kind of explore the process and the system. I think you mentioned that those would be unlimited visits. Is that right?
I'm sorry. So if they were going to be assigned to a test center, could they have unlimited visits?
Yeah, visits in advance to test out the system, test out the process.
Oh, okay. So like the practice exams, yes, that'll be something you schedule, because a practice exam will also be using their proctoring system. So those are live human proctors. So we'd have to have them schedule that, right? Because that is using resources on the vendor side. So what they can do unlimited is watching like a demo or doing a demo that's not proctored. So we can have them watching videos, doing demos unproctored. But if they're going to schedule a practice exam to see how it's going to work with the live proctor and to, fully test out, exposed older written questions or however we might have it, that's something they will schedule.
And is that something that they could do multiple of, or is it like a one-time thing?
I think largely people are only going to want to schedule it at one time.
Right.
Time it would take, but if they would ask us for if they want another practice exam, we certainly can work to schedule another one.
And each one would be an additional cost, is that right?
A cost to us.
Yeah, right.
It's right.
Okay.
It's resources
No cost to
on the
the
vendor end, right?
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So my understanding is that Measure Learning is actually online, and I believe they have a presentation. And so to the extent we have any questions for the vendor, I'm sure we can reserve those questions until after the presentation. And I'm sure I have a few as well. So Audrey, I'll let you take over and see if we can have them join us.
We're going to promote the Measure Learning presenters now. So just give them a second to appear in the webinar. Okay, I'm seeing some of the folks promoted. Let's see.
Everyone's been promoted.
Everyone's been promoted. Okay. Is Neil, so Neil Isford is promoted?
Except for Neil, I don't see him online.
That's okay. Danielle, maybe do you want to start and then you can introduce the group then? Danielle.
Sorry, I had to find the unmute button there. We actually need Neil to be promoted in order to kick off the presentation. So are we still not seeing him join yet?
I don't see Neil online.
Yeah, he is not in the attendee pool. Do you want to get started, and as soon as he joins, we can promote him?
Sure.
Oh, wait, and Isford, that's him. I see him.
Just found him.
Yeah, there he is.
He's been promoted.
Yes. It looks like his name's Nisford, so that's why.
Perfect. We'll just give him a second to pop up here.
Hello, it's Neil. Can you see me, hear me? There I am.
Yes.
Great. Technology. Well, listen, first of all, good morning. And I'm Neil Isford. I'm the Chief Customer Officer for Measure Learning. I want to thank the committee for the opportunity here to talk about Measure Learning and our capabilities. We have spent a lot of time with the California Bar. We feel very qualified to not only be ready for February, but to do the experience exam in November. So from a format point of view, we've got about 20 minutes worth of content. I know you may not be able to resist asking questions, but what we'd like to try to do is get through it in 20 minutes and then leave some time for questions. As long as you have questions, we're available. So what I thought I would do up front here, just to introduce some of my colleagues. I've got some of the team, if we go to the next chart. And we didn't bring the whole company, but I did want to bring some of our senior people. We have a lot of experience here. I've been doing this for 30 years in terms of implementing data analytics based solutions for clients. And Sean, who's our Senior Vice President of Global Service Delivery, has been doing this for over 20 years in terms of customer support and operational roles among supporting some of the biggest and most demanding customers in the world. Dr. Ashley Norris is our Head of Strategic Growth Initiatives, but she's also our Chief Compliance Officer. Has been doing that for over 16 years in the accreditation space and was a dean at 3 different universities before that. Corey, we're going to give some extra time to because we know security is super important. Corey leads our security as well as our operational quality, and we know how important security is here, so we're going to give Corey some extra time here. Danielle has been in this space for about 11 years. She's the vice president responsible for you and came to us through our Yardstick acquisition. And Zach has been at Measure Learning for 10.5 years and has, I think, been in dialogue with California Bar since about 2019. So he has some familiarity as well. So with that, let me jump in and first of all, start by giving you an overview of the company. If we go to the next chart. We have been in business for about 16 years. We were actually, we like to think we really pioneered online proctoring, meaning using technology and proctors to deliver secure testing. We started off in the higher ed space back in 2008, but started to move our business more and more towards professional testing just based on market demand. So well over half our business now is in the professional testing space. We still cover higher ed, but professional testing is where we spend and where we're investing most heavily. We've had a fairly, I would say, systematic approach to building capabilities. We bought a company called Yardstick. In addition to Danielle, we got a psychometrics and assessment development team. We picked up an exam driver, which is our platform we use today, and we thought that was quite important. If we're going to be an end-to-end provider of assessment solutions, we thought it was important to have our old exam driver. We came out of COVID, actually, during COVID, we thought, geez, when COVID finally ends, we're going to have a lot of companies that we took to online are going to want to have a hybrid option, a test center option. And so we didn't have our own test center network. So we bought Scantron, which gave us 1,400 test centers. And we also picked up some good software as well, again, as well as some very good skills around assessment development. And then last year we bought Examity. Examity allowed us to further and strengthen our position in online proctoring. Examity had 1,000 proctors, which were employees. And we thought that was a really good add, as well as some of the technology we picked up. So that's sort of our history. What do we do well? And we'll go through more detail on this. The ability to do end-to-end assessment delivery. We can do our own upfront assessment development or psychometrics or work with companies like Kaplan. Either is absolutely fine. Our online proctoring, our test center delivery, and exam platform, these are all things that we're bringing to the table as part of our proposal. We're very scalable. Just to give you an idea, our biggest client is doing 700,000 online proctored exams a year. Our AWS platform that we designed, we were the only large vendor that had no disruptions during COVID, despite the fact that we grew dramatically. And that's really a tribute to the architecture and that we've got in place for online proctoring. And again, I also mentioned the test centers. We also have a large test center network, which is very flexible, and we can add capacity there as well, either by additional sites or additional seats. And we'll talk to some more of this. And security, I'm going to hit on this a number of times. It is really the foundational. If you're going to be a leader in professional testing and high stakes exams, you've really got to invest in security. And Corey will take you through more of that later. We do a lot of customers that I say have similar characteristics to you. We have a lot of high stakes exams. We have a lot which are hybrid. We have a lot that, again, are license exams and are windowed. So if I look at some of these AAMC, we do their preview exam, about 25,000 windowed exams. We do, from a licensure point of view, we do the nurses in Canada, again, which is a hybrid. They do online and test center when I say that. Chartered accountants in Ireland, we certify the accountants there, and that's about 22,000 a year exams. APC is actually not windowed, but that's a good example. That's about 60,000. And again, that is online and test center capability. And though LSAC is not windowed, we have been working with LSAC for a long time. We do the argumentative writing exam today, and that's around 75,000. tests a year. So this is just a small subset of our, what is about 1,000 professional testing clients. Mostly North America based, but we have a big base in Australia and a growing base in Europe as well. You might, if you haven't heard of us, you might wonder about who we are. We are very financially sound in terms of revenue and profit, and our major owner is Griffin in San Francisco. They are a $9 billion assets under management private equity company. They only invest in industry leaders. If you ever want to talk to them about us, we'd be welcome to open that up. But we're a very financially sound organization. In terms of where we're going, where we're investing, I sort of hinted at this. We really view ourselves as an assessment solution provider, again, focused on students or professionals. But the three areas that we are investing in, we call them our core pillars. The first one is security. And we'll talk about our Proctor model, which is unique. We'll talk about our secure browser called Guardian, which we developed very specifically to protect content and minimize cheating. And we'll talk about some of our enhanced monitoring security services. But to us, that's super, super important. And again, an area of investment. But the test taker experience is also important. You don't want to make it so complicated to cover security that it's not an easy experience. We want to feel almost invisible here. That's our objective to the test taker. They want to worry about passing the bar exam. We don't want them worried about the experience. And having said that, the test sponsors are very important as well. We don't relegate those to second class, whether that be providing good transparency to information, providing you with information you need to be able to investigate any potential problems. That's very important as well, and you'll hear more about that. And then operational excellence, the ability to be agile, be able to change, but to be able to provide that scalable infrastructure at a cost-effective manner. That's obviously part of our investment. We don't do anything else. We don't develop content. We're not a training company. I mean, this is what we do. We do basically, assessment solution focused really on delivery of exams online or through test centers. I'm going to just give you some other statistics again in the next chart. And again, if you go to the next one, in terms of how big we are, we do last year we did 6.3 million exams. About 90% of those are online, and you can see the numbers on the left in terms of our Proctor capability. We do 30,000 exams as our capacity today, though we can easily scale it up. That's as of today. Just to give you a context, we're about 2 times bigger than any other company in the world in terms of being able to do online testing. And we do it obviously because it's online. We have customers that have test takers all over the world. Our test center network, as you saw from my other comments, was an ad. We now have 4,000 test center personnel across 1,400 centers. About 600 and those are 650 are in the U.S. And we have a number of seats available as well. So we don't have any worry in terms of our ability to scale and meet the capacity requirements in your Windows exams in not just February, but obviously in July where we get the higher volume. Let me turn it to Ashley. Compliance, before we get into security, this is a very important area. So I'm going to just ask Ashley to make some comments here.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us. So I really wanted to provide a snapshot of our security, privacy, and compliance and how we govern it, and some of the certifications that I think are most applicable to your test takers and to your programs. So how we govern all of these, information security, compliance with certain privacy laws, the VPAT and our accessibility compliance requirements is under the Office of Security, Privacy, and Compliance. So I oversee that along with the Chief Information Security Officer. And we have leadership, many that you're meeting today that are on this call, that really ensure that we have compliance across every function of our business, because we do maintain technology, and of course, sales and account management and our operations, as Neil discussed, kind of, the breadth of what they do. We also engage privacy counsel on a regular basis that work with us, including Bard Counsel in California, that actually monitor the changing laws. As we all know, they're consistently changing across the U.S. and internationally. We, as you see as a note, we have we adhere to CPRA, CCPA compliance, as well as other state laws. We also serve test takers, and you may have test takers that are international test takers that adhere to GDPR. So we maintain compliance across all other applicable international laws because we do support global test takers. Our data management is a big piece of this kind of governance and how the committee operates. And it's just really ensuring that we have all the policies in place. We have SOC 2 Type 2 certification. We have data protection framework certification, especially for our international counterparts. So as you all can see from just this snapshot, security, privacy, and compliance is really top of mind for us and just ensures that kind of all of these other things like business continuity, our procedures are in place if there's any security incidents, are all set. So really, you all don't have to worry about it. I have to worry about it, but no. But thank you. And I think we'll pass it on to Corey. Yep. He's going to speak about security.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Ashley. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Good afternoon. So first, I'll talk about technical security, and then we'll move into more process-related security. So I'm just going to make a distinction. Technical security, think of that as network, domain protections. So this is a security scorecard, which is a third-party service that essentially analyzes all competitors as well as us in this space. And you'll notice Measure Learning kind of in the middle there on the left. So essentially every month they're doing a scan of these platforms to see are there security best practices being enforced, as well as you all can imagine, technical security is a moving target. And so that's why you see some top movers, people moving up, and then top and bottom movers, people moving down. You'll notice Measure Learning here, 97. And so we moved up 3 points this last month, which we're very proud of. So this just gives you a lens into what Ashley was talking about from a SOC 2 Type 2 compliance perspective. We really focus on technical security. And you'll actually notice, Neil mentioned Examity. Examity is also now back on par with us. So when we acquired them, they were in the low 90s, and now obviously being combined one company, we helped elevate their technical security up as well. So the last thing I'll mention, though, the bottom, that green bar, we also boast a good uptime. So 3 nines here. So if anyone's in the technical space, you'll understand that terminology. But essentially, where our platform is up. Neil mentioned during COVID, we're the only platform to not go down. And so that's something we're really proud of. And again, that's on our AWS infrastructure, the way we have business continuity and disaster recovery plans set up. So from a reliability perspective, it's both the technical security as well as the uptime are both really important. Now I'll switch gears to what we'll call process security. I know this is a bit of an eye chart. I'll go fairly quick, but if anyone's new to online proctoring, which is what I'm going to talk through here, this kind of gives you a lens into the procedures that a test taker would experience, as well as just the process from a security perspective. So just to orient you to the slides, the color coding, there's prevent in the gray, deter in the green, and in the darker color, detect. And so again, any cybersecurity experts out there, you'll understand that terminology. And then you have the 3 swim lanes across the middle here. So pre-exam, during exam, and post-exam. And so security doesn't just happen when the test taker is sitting at the computer, it's before, during, and after. And so just wanted to give a lens into those elements. So for the California bar, you have that across the top as kind of the actor, and then you have Measure Learning doing the majority of the steps here. So the registration process, so meaning granting eligibility, that's obviously a form of security. Not anyone can just come sit down. They have to make sure they're pre-registered, et cetera. And so the very first step, though, for us is really when the proctor and the test taker are connected. So that's where the security really begins from our perspective. The very first thing we're doing, we're actually running scripts on the test taker's machine to check for virtual machines, to check for other unpermitted applications like remote control, things that are going to be threatening to the test. We're going to check the photo ID of the test taker. That's typically a passport or photo, a driver's license, or ultimately whatever California bar wants us to accept. Then we're going to do the other virtual environment checks. So disabling screenshots, turning off copy and paste, making sure there's nothing else running on the computer that we don't want. And then that bigger box at the bottom, it's the physical environment security, which is really important. And I left it big on purpose because it's kind of a lot. We're doing room scans. So we're seeing the room or the environment the test taker is sitting in, looking at their workspace, make sure there's no people or unpermitted resources. We're doing a monitor inspection. So that's essentially using a reflective surface to look at the computer to make sure they don't have sticky notes or transparency sleeves on top of the computer, which would be threatening. Resource checks, if you happen to permit resources. So for example, some of our clients print whiteboards. We would want to check that whiteboard. Again, I don't think that's the case here, but is an important step. And then lastly, a person check. So that's the check for watches and check for earbuds or listening devices. And so that's really the physical security. And then the last step of that is securing the cell phone. So again, everyone has a cell phone. Typically, that's going to be a threat to an exam. So we're going to make sure we place it behind them out of reach, and that way they're not able to access it during the exam. So as you can see, kind of before they ever see content, there are security procedures that we're enforcing from an online proctoring perspective. And then that password entry, that's really the transition stage where we password inject or unlock the exam is really what we mean there. So during the exam, the California Bar, anyone with the right credentials on our platform can actually live look in and watch these exam sessions if they so choose. So this gives a lot of transparency and visibility into our platform and what's going on for our clients. And so that's just a notable thing from a security perspective. But back to the swim lane for measure learning, this is really when the live proctor is doing their thing. They're watching the test taker, making sure they're following the rules of the California Bar, make sure they're not looking off screen, speaking aloud, having other people in the room, leaving the area. And so the behavioral monitoring, it's really a lot going on there, but you can imagine that's really what the proctoring is. The system's doing some flagging. So if we see remote access tools that we had previously closed, kick back on, that's going to alert the proctor and we'll make sure we take action. Ultimately, the vast majority of sessions will never need this, but if we need to intervene, and that's what the terminology we use, where we interrupt the test taker to remind them about the rules, ultimately, if they continue to do the infractions, that's where we can escalate to an intervention specialist, which my next slide I'll get to, but it's an elevated role from a proctoring perspective, where they can issue final warnings and ultimately terminate an exam if we can't correct the behavior. If we ever intervene or terminate, then the incident report is going to be submitted to our client. So that's it, the straddling of that line. The next one is incident report creation. That's essentially a commentary of what happened and when did it happen. So I mentioned the live looking capability. So California Bar would receive a Danielle took her exam. She left at 55 minutes. She returned 2 minutes later, and have all the details about that. And so ultimately, we're just reporting those incidents, and then California Bar ultimately decides what to do about that situation. The other things are in the post-exam phase. We've already talked about psychometric analysis, kind of post, seeing how items are performing. That's definitely an important element that goes on. But the other 4 boxes on the right here, really some of the things that set us apart, in my opinion. So we're doing collusion detection. So ultimately, we're looking at telemetry data on the machines to see if there's other odd pattern of behavior, the people potentially interacting using the same device, same network, where they maybe that's not expected. We're doing security audits. So our proctors are really good at what they do, but inevitably, we need that second set of eyes to go in and investigate some things. So that's really what the security session audits are. Excuse me. And then we're doing web form monitoring as well. So that's that bottom green box where we're out there hunting for how do you beat measure learning? How do you cheat on the California Bar? Essentially all the web forums that are out there. The bad actors might be propagating. And so web monitoring is an important aspect to essentially help us learn. What are people saying? What are they trying to do? And ultimately that middle box is security recommendations. So we try to be very consultative with our clients and recommend potential policy adjustments or any trends that we're seeing. And so really, again, it's kind of an ecosystem. It doesn't just happen when the test taker is sitting for the exam. There's really a full spectrum here. So I know that was a lot, but if anyone was new to online proctoring, hopefully that was helpful.
Hey, Corey,
yeah,
there's a question from the LA office here.
Sure.
A question?
There you go. You're good.
Hello, yes, hi. This is Robbie in the LA office. I didn't mean to interrupt, but where are the proctors? Physically, where are the proctors for the February California Bar exam?
Sure. Yeah, I mentioned business continuity and disaster recovery. So we are geographically dispersed. So heavy concentration in India, Philippines, Ghana, Jamaica. So yeah, we're kind of proctors all across the globe.
So that proctoring is outsourced outside of the United States?
So I would use that outsource. I would challenge that a little bit. So most of our employees. So Neil mentioned we acquired Examity, so they get measure learning paychecks. They're essentially our employees. So I wouldn't use the word outsource for them. But yes, their proctoring is happening outside of the United States, if that's the question.
And how many applicants would each proctor be looking at during the February bar exam?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our standard, we call it kind of the launch process. So that pre-exam phase, that's if I say launch, that's what I mean is kind of getting the security check-in done. That's at a 1-to-1. So meaning one proctor to one test taker. Once they're in the exam, we can go up to 4-to-1. It ends up being about 3.5 when you average it out. But essentially, when you're just watching, you can just watch a couple more people. And we found that to be the right ratio. I'll mention that we're actually the kind of the best at the proctor ratio in the industry. There's some of our competitors out there doing 15, 30, 50-to-1. We think 4-to-1 is kind of the max what we want to shoot for.
I'm sorry, I just have one or two more questions.
Sure.
I visited a test center in Los Angeles in the Koreatown area where there was no measure learning person on site. That seemed like that the role of the measure learning person was delegated to someone working for another company at that site. So for the California bar exam, is there a measure learning person at every site where the bar is going to be administered?
Yeah, Neil or Sean, do you want to speak to that? If not, I can cover
Yeah,
it.
I can take that one. You would visited one of our third-party test center network sites. They are not paid by us, but they're trained by us. And so as far as the requirements for training, the requirements for the proctors to be trained, the PC specifications, security specifications, lockers, checking of sleeves and pockets and all those things, they follow the rigor of holding to our security standards, but they are our third-party test center network that you visited, and they're trained and held to our standards with our inspection processes.
So are all your California test centers that you use, are they all third parties? Or are there any with measure learning people, employees there?
All of our California test centers are third-party, trained and monitored and secured by us.
Sean, have you been to the one that I visited? Have you yourself physically been to the LA Koreatown location? It's 2 rooms leased from a for-profit school offering ESL classes. Have you been there yourself?
No, we have 1,300 sites. I haven't been to that one. I am familiar with that one, and I'm also familiar with the experience of that one. That wouldn't likely be one we necessarily recommend for your admin. And when we do admin exercises versus the exercise you went through, that was very ad hoc. When we do large admins like you have with 4,500 test takers in February and 9,000 in July, because we do that at larger scales, it'd be a whole different level of preparation in terms of ensuring site readiness. I'm aware of the opportunities we had at that site, and I'm very grateful for your feedback with that site. But coming up to an admin in California, those sites will absolutely be ready, or we wouldn't even put those sites in your scheduling tool.
And I just had, I appreciate your comments, Sean. My last question is, will the proctors see the bar exam that they are proctoring? Will they
actually
see
have
the
it.
Are you
exam
referring to
questions?
or are you referring to online proctoring?
Online proctoring, will they see the exam that the applicants that they're monitoring are taking?
That's a choice. So we do have a configuration on our platform to do what we call screen obfuscation, which essentially would blur. So we recently released that, so relatively new, but generally for all of our other examples that Neil mentioned for those other clients, we're not doing the screen obfuscation, so it's not been a security concern. So by default, yes, they would see it, but there's options to restrict it.
A lot of our high stakes clients mask the URL and mask the questions. We have both of those capabilities. When we do implementation for this project, we can go as secure or unsecure as you want. All of that's optional. Turn it on or turn it off.
And just to comment, sorry if I'm going too far here, but like the reason why it's kind of default on is it's really typically important to see where that cursor is, where they're typing. And so we can connect that to the webcam. So you can imagine with remote access, we've seen people stretching and their keyboard or mouse is moving. And if I can't see where that cursor is, all of a sudden I'm kind of at a loss for what's going on. So there's just some trade-off conversations to be made on, is it full visibility for proctors or is it not?
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Robbie.
Corey, keep us moving.
Yeah, sure. So next slide. So we'll talk about, we'll touch on the question you had. So you actually, thank you for the questions, because this is what we do a little bit different than a lot of our competitors. So we don't rely on the proctor to kind of play all of the roles that may end up happening. So the proctor is there to launch the exam, to watch the exam. Inevitably, when people bring their own computers and their own networks from online proctoring, there's going to be technical issues. And so we have a dedicated team of technicians that, instead of our proctor having to, go down a 10 or 15-minute troubleshooting step with, we send that to a technician who is better qualified, better educated on handling technical issues. So you can think of it as kind of a conveyor belt, and we have kind of off ramps, if you will. So technicians are another dedicated team. I reference intervention specialists, but just to say it again, so a proctor is going to say, hey, Sean, you're not allowed to speak aloud. If Sean continues to do that, that's where we escalate to our intervention specialist and go back to one-to-one. And so again, we talk about the ratio of launching one-to-one, watching roughly 3 to 4 to 1. But then if it's intervention needed, we're going back to 1-to-1. So we can make sure we're giving all the attention that we need to that situation. That's where we're going to, again, final warnings, potentially terminate the exam if it requires it. So that intervention specialist helps the proctor stay proctoring, and then they can take that difficult situation. The third team here in that black color, exam advocates. So there are situations where we need to reach out to California Bar or other stakeholders to confirm accommodations that were mentioned, previously in the call. If a password's not working, or just end up something that we don't have control to resolve. So again, instead of a proctor picking up the phone and not proctoring, we want the exam advocates to do that. The last team in the middle row here, incident report team. Every incident that we send is re-verified by a different human. So essentially it's the proctor or the intervention specialist who issue the initial report, and then a second human who re-watches the video, confirms, adds color, commentary, and then sends it out. So that's our way to essentially not send false positive flags to our clients, and to make sure that if we're sending you an incident report, something of material happened. The last team here at the bottom is actually the team I oversee. So we're inspecting. So we have audits, we do observations, we do investigations. So essentially kind of my team is making sure that the security is sound, we're plugging gaps if there are any, and we're making sure that the proctors are properly trained in executing our procedure as well as your procedure. So I'll just say that's a bit different than some of our competitors out in the market, where the proctor kind of has to do all of that. So we think it's more scalable and better execution to be able to do it this way. So we've talked a lot about what the process is, how we do it, and then now outcomes. So some of you all may be more interested in the outcomes. So I went and pulled data from 2023 to now. So this is a few days old, but pretty up-to-date stats here. So we have over 1,000 cheating rings that we've caught. And so there are bad actors out there in the world. I'm sure we're all familiar with that. And not very different in this space. And so again, 1,000 cheating rings, and the way we define a cheating ring is 3 or more individuals who are connected. So maybe Zach and I, or Sean and I, are roommates, and we were helping each other. That matters. Obviously, that's not a good outcome. But we're talking about 3 or more people connected. So typically, that's where we're going to find the web forum traffic, or people selling services, or attempting to breach our platform. So we have caught over 1,000, and so there are bad actors, but we're definitely catching them. Earlier on the process map, I mentioned the applications that we're detecting and closing. So that list is currently about 550. It's going to grow by that February. We're probably going to have another dozen or so more, because every week or so I'm adding 1 or 2, depending on what the web forum traffic finds, what investigations turn out. So this is a living, breathing ecosystem here, where new threats are seen and we react to those threats. I mentioned web forms a few times. So since 2023, we've found and disrupted 40 or more. And so what disruption typically is, it's a cease and desist, it's a notification to the payment provider, the domain host, to essentially take down these websites and forums. So again, it's a little bit of a game of whack-a-mole. There's a lot of individuals out there trying to sell services, whether they be real or not. But if we find them, we try to disrupt them. Some unique capabilities that I'll go into a little bit more detail here are listed in the middle. So the question came earlier about screen obfuscation. So we are watching the screen of the computer as well as the webcam. So again, that helps us correlate behaviors. We have the lowest ratio I mentioned. During COVID, we had a lot of clients come to online proctoring probably a little bit faster than they maybe had intended. And so we developed professional testing standards. So we traditionally had higher education. That's a different ecosystem and cohort of test takers versus professional testing with the high stakes. So we actually created, issued, and I can link you all to it. We have our own professional testing standards, the way we handle high stakes exams. we're obviously configurable by our client, and so we can kind of change some things here and there, but we have our kind of a default way we do testing. Deep fakes, I wanted to put that out here. It doesn't happen a lot, but we do catch individuals using deep fakes. So if anyone's familiar with like facial filter technology to materially misrepresent where I'm looking or the way my face appears. So this would be for a proxy test taker who's trying to take the test on someone else. We detect those. We've had over 100 people that we've reported and caught with those. So again, just know that there are threats out there that we are catching. Collusion detection, I've referenced that a few times. So that's the ability to connect dots to individuals who may be assisting each other. VPN detection. VPNs are not necessarily bad, but they can be indicative of bad behavior. And so we do detect VPNs. And then lastly, Neil mentioned it, and I'm about to go into more detail, our secure browser. So we've developed our own proprietary secure browser called Guardian that really helps the proctor and ensure that the exam is being fairly administered. So if we go to the next slide. So again, you'll see the pre, during, and post-exam, a similar theme here. So I won't go through all of these. Feel free to read through it. But essentially during the pre-exam phase, as I mentioned, we can detect and shut down applications. We actually also snapshot those applications. That way we can go backwards in time. If we found a new threat to be emerging, we can go backwards and see who's using that in the past. How many keyboards, how many mice. That instant video access is important. So again, not only can our team kind of rewind in real time to go watch that, but California Bar, the right administrators on the California Bar side could also go see the videos. The during exam, we're doing a lot of the same telemetry data capture of Bluetooth, mice, keyboard, but in during exam, we're going full screen mode. So essentially the test taker is unable to access other applications on their computer. So that kind of forces Guardian to be front and center. We're stopping copy and paste if we need to. I think there's a need for you all to have copy and paste. So our default would be copy, paste, stop. But obviously if it's required by the exam, we can do that. Stopping screenshots, real-time proctor alerts. I talked about the URL obfuscation. So again, Guardian's kind of doing the technical side and the humans doing the watching and doing the detection of those. Post-exam, I've talked about our incident reports, collusion detection, and our teams. So just another visual here about Guardian and the way we deploy. The last bottom bar here, Guardian is also used in our test centers. So I imagine in the future, there'll be some individuals who online one time and maybe they need to take it again and maybe they need to go to a test center. Guardian is deployed in both. So from a cohesive experience, that should be seen as a benefit because they'll be familiar with the look, feel, and experience within Guardian. The next slide, and I think it's mine. I got two more. So this is, we've been using the term dual modality, I think, in this call. And so I think most of you are familiar with it, but essentially it's our test center offering as well as our online proctoring offering. That list on the left-hand side is kind of everything that's the same. And so again, Guardian, live proctoring, proctor training, photo ID validation, you'll see that long list of things that are overlapped and the same. There are some distinct abilities here with test centers versus online, and I'll call those out. So for test center, when being in person physically, pocket checks, and then we provide the network, physical space, and resources. So kind of the environment's in a different offering here. But on the online proctoring side, we've got the 24/7 availability. Obviously, test centers have business hours that they have constrict from, but most of our clients like the 24/7, 365 nature of online, the intervention specialist, and that live look-in capability. So essentially, the story here is there's a lot that's the same. There's a few things that are distinct, but that's what the unique offerings here that we have. The last slide. So test taker support. So I think we've talked about experience being kind of, that and security from us are really neck and neck on what's our priorities. So we take the test taker support very seriously. So pre-exam and post-exam, there's really a few ways that test takers can contact us. Chat is preferred and typically one that test takers also prefer. So we have a 85% self-service resolution rate. So meaning test takers find their own answers and they don't even need to connect to someone. So we take a lot of time and energy to get that curated to be helpful. If they do need to get connected to someone, it's about a minute wait to get connected to someone on chat, and our chat duration is about 12 minutes. So we usually are, again, supporting them quickly. Phone would be our next preferred method. So it's about a minute there as well for a wait time and about 9 minutes duration. And then tickets, I mean, anyone's familiar with emails and tickets, they're usually asynchronous, a little bit slower, but we do have 6 hours on our response right there. So those are 24/7, 365 support channels. So if someone woke up in the middle of the night and they had a question for us, they can reach us. That green bar in the middle, the 95% candidate satisfaction, I put that in the middle on purpose because that's for our support as well as our proctoring. So that bottom right section, I won't go through it again, but again, it's our technician proctors. Those are the during exam. That's who they're going to communicate with. The last thing that I didn't want to forget about on the bottom left is really our exam preparation. So I was talking about practice exams earlier. I heard a lot of conversations about that. So we have the ability for individuals to, as many times as they want, to test their equipment. So they can make sure their network is good, their computer's set up, they don't actually have 3 monitors plugged in. They can go as many times as they want to test their equipment because we want them to be prepared just like they want to be prepared. And then if they end up having a deficiency on one of those items, maybe their RAM is a little bit too high, we give them knowledge base articles on how to remedy that. And so that knowledge base as well as Test It Out are really 2 good tools. I think California Bar is interested in doing kind of real practice exams where they get connected to a proctor. So that's even a bit further, and that's definitely a preferred step. That way a test taker can really simulate exam day, and that'll make them less stressed and better prepared for the test. And so those are all really good things. And again, test taker support is something we take very serious because we're really an extension of the California Bar in these scenarios. And so obviously our execution and performance reflects on you as an organization, and we take that very seriously. So Neil, I think I'll pass back to you, I think, for our last slide.
Yes, the last chart, and then we'll open up for some additional questions. If I sort of summarize out how to think about what we bring to the table, first one is experience. As I said, we've been at this with all the companies we bought over 20 years. And what really distinguishes us is we really focus, we're the best in the industry on online proctoring, and we really focus on hybrid delivery. So there's some other companies out there that are largely test center players. We grew up in the online proctoring and then added the test center capability to provide that dual modality capability. But programs of your size are something we are comfortable with, and your expectations are high, as they should be, given the test you're delivering and your test takers. Capabilities, hopefully this helped give you a quick overview. Went through it pretty quickly. But this is not just around proctors. This is around a lot around technology and process, and security and customer experience are paramount. And obviously is making sure this platform is scalable so that you're not worried about, is there going to be performance issues here on the windowed exam on administrations. And then our approach, this is something that we pride ourselves in, is to be collaborative in terms of our project management. It's not, you got to do it one way or the other. We want to be flexible in solutioning, and again, we're really are focused on dual modality. So with that, why don't we open it up for more questions? And we appreciate the opportunity here.
Members of the committee, any questions? I have quite a few, but I would defer to my members. I see a hand raised in the San Francisco Bar office.
Yeah. Eventually, I'd like to hear from our members. The staff report said that some of them tested the software, and Robbie alluded to visiting the in-person test center. So I'd like to hear what they thought of that. Let's see. Who's going to do the psychometric analysis? And from that chart I saw, it looks like it's bar staff will be doing the grading, and and will we be testing to detect copying of multiple choice answers between different test takers as we do now?
I think the process now, I don't mean to speak for Measure, but because now you're handing out paper booklets and that you're at a big center, or even just, big enough to have somebody next to you that has a paper booklet, that's a different proposition than being able to randomize multiple choice questions in the software. And either remotely, if you're testing at home, or even if you're in a test center and there's someone next to you, it's a different capability to not have to have a paper booklet, right? So they can randomize the multiple choice questions in the system.
Well, let me ask this then. In the physical test centers, are people so isolated from each other that they can't see the other person's screen?
we have dividers, and so there's a couple of tactics there. We seat the individuals, and so we will intentionally spread them out in the number of seats that we need to have available. But there are dividers that would essentially prevent kind of glancing to the right and left. So there are measures in place to stop kind of shoulder surfing, I think is the term that we typically use.
Yeah, and they're
Okay,
not generally placed next to each other. So if someone comes in for the same type of exam at the same time, which in this case could happen, we also try to place them further apart if possible in that case scenario.
Okay, so they could theoretically be sitting against somebody who wants to be a chartered accountant in Ireland. Be pretty.
Yeah, very good point. Yeah.
Okay, so the capacity. I heard something about 2 sets of written questions needing to be developed for July, suggesting that perhaps Measure didn't have the ability to test enough of our folks during one sitting for a bar exam. What's the source of that? Or perhaps it's a misunderstanding, but I heard it and it raised a question in my mind. Audrey?
It's not a misunderstanding. 9,000 test takers. There isn't a vendor that we spoke to that could administer it in one form, the same way we do it now over exactly the same time, everyone testing on one form of the test. It's what Measure has proposed to us is a 4-day window, which would require 2 forms of the test.
Okay, that raises a concern in my mind because as I understand it, the written questions performance test pipeline is, well, let's just say the tank's getting a little low. And if we're burning 2x the number of questions every July, we're probably going to have more Edge team members. Is that correct? And are they available to us? I know we have a couple of apprentices right now that are working with them. How are you addressing that potential crisis?
Oh, well, crisis. The Edge team is very aware. So Amy and Adrienne have met with the Edge team about all these changes multiple times. They know that for the July 25 exam, we're going to need 2 forms of test, that we're going to have to work to improve questions in the item bank that we have now to be able to review and have those questions ready. You'll see that as part of question selection you'll have to do a little more review too, right? For the July 25 exam. And then moving forward into 26, 27, all the exams coming up in the future that are going to be using this same version of the test, perhaps before we start being able to develop and administer anything new with the bar exam, we are going to have drafted questions come in also from Kaplan. Edge team's role will be the same, but they will give us drafted written questions as well for the Edge team to, just as they now review and prepare and edit for their item banks.
Let me find my thought. Okay, I'll come back to that one. We're proctoring in real time and I want to confirm we're keeping the audio and video proctoring record. So if an appeal of some Chapter 6 violation comes to us, those will be available for us to review. Is that correct?
That's correct. Again, not to speak for the vendor, but they have it stored, and then we can also download and store on our side. So they have a certain retention policy for video and audio, but they will also give us, the client, the ability to, especially anything that was flagged for incidents, download and store on our end.
Okay, back to the capacity question. So you're anticipating that, I want to pick 75% out of the air. People are going to be doing remote testing using their own equipment at their own location via the internet. Measure does not have the capacity to administer that many online. I guess it's probably a proctoring limit, isn't it?
I'll take that one. It's not an online restriction. Generally, it wouldn't be a test center restriction. It's a test center restriction in California, just to ensure we can administer it all at the exact same time. we've done in the last 6 weeks, I did 70,000 exams in a week. And we've done large administrations for this level of stakes with some of the customers previously mentioned. I've done 25,000 exams over a 2-day period at the exact same time with no issues. We have no online proctoring scaling issues whatsoever, no concerns over that. The February admin at 4,500 test takers and the July admin at 9,000 test takers being 13.5 annualized across the two. We're not worried about that scale whatsoever on online proctoring modality. We have thousands of proctors available.
But then again, what's the source of the limitation that's requiring that we have 2 separate sets of questions, presumably to be delivered on two different periods, perhaps close together, but not simultaneously?
Yeah, that's really just protecting to the test center portion for the July administration. The July administration is a big one. February is going to be a great place for us to learn some lessons, and February's scale is really small comparatively. When you look at the July test admin, you're running 9,000 test takers. Amongst those 9,000 test takers, the estimates coming in right now are about 67%, 66.7% remote, which is about 6,000. When you're doing 3,000 in California all at the same time, we'd rather hedge our bets and split that apart and prepare to split that apart than run into any kind of capacity concerns. And then the length of the exam is relatively long. So when you think about the way that the breaks and the lunches are following, you look at the way that it's a multi-day test, you look at the way that's a 6.5 hour test. Logistically, you don't want to cause a bottleneck when you're in one state. And then the arrivals based on the cities within California and the venues available, we'd rather play it safe and give a phenomenal experience with high security than try to bottle it all up based on what we've done with other customers.
LA office.
Yes.
You can go ahead.
Hello, LA here.
I just have one more. So when people come to the test centers, they're using your computer equipment, correct?
Yes.
That's correct. So we have test center equipment specifications set for our third-party network. We also use some pop-up centers where we'll do larger administrations where we bring in our own equipment and we set those equipment up with our proctors. In this case, we'll be doing a mixture of both. We want to make sure there's more capacity than necessary. But it will all be up to our equipment specifications, not equipment that anyone has to bring. It's not like bringing your laptop situation. That's not going to happen.
Okay, some people though, for instance, might want an ergonomic keyboard. Is that something you allow for? They could bring their own to plug in?
Yeah, we have a very deep accommodation process. We make a large variety of accommodations. The list goes on. And so we have a process that we process map out with your team that says anyone who needs to request an accommodation, we have dozens of those that we have to meet and specify to ensure equal access to testing.
Okay, I would just hate for somebody to have to file an accommodation request with us for something as simple as that, plugging in a different keyboard to a USB port.
Yeah, depending on what the request type is, that can vary. But we'll walk through all of those as we implement the process.
And sorry, just to comment real quick, there would be a security concern for sure to let someone bring in an external device and plug it into one of our machines. Just that probably would be something you actually want to consider because there's a lot of AI that can be embedded into keyboard. So anyway, just that's a side topic probably, but just it would typically need to be approved by you all and then ran through us.
Okay, thank you.
LA office. By the way, I know we have to end this meeting at noon, and so I want to make sure we have enough time at the end of the day to vote on the resolution and at least to debate it and then to vote on it. And so let's just try to get all the questions in. So starting with the LA office.
Yeah. So I have a couple. So one question I had is whether this allows or whether this now allows us to allow students or test takers to take the exam in other states or countries, since there are these other locations available.
It does. We're global. We test in just about every country and every location. Again, it's based on the specifications of what you want to allow. but we have test takers everywhere, even in multi-languages. So depending on what you want us to do, we can scale and allow online proctoring from various locations, whether that's another state domestically or international test takers. We do that every day.
And I want to set the record. I want to set the record very straight that we will need to decide on the specifications. And so, to the extent we are given an opportunity, I'm going to make it clear on the record that you just cannot define any specifications without any collaboration or an involvement of the CBE. So, with that, go ahead. More questions?
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that we're going to have to discuss and figure out as a the CBE is whether we're going to be allowing that. Just because there's a lot of different considerations if we do go into allowing other states or other students in other states or countries to take the exam. My other question is about the screening process for proctors. Since it's a third party, if they're at a test site, I guess, what is the process for ensuring that these proctors know how to not only administer the test, we know that part, but administer the test to those who have testing accommodations in the form of extra time or needing to bring, whatever support systems they need or accommodations they need. How are those proctors trained to be ready to accommodate those accommodations?
Yeah, the proctors, first we have pretty clear and strict job description requirements. And then based on those job descriptions, we have various screening tools that must be adhered to with passing test results. They go through initial training, and our proctors, based on a subset of KPIs, have to meet a certain expectation of very basic work. And then they move up through 4 levels of proctoring before they'll even get to a place where they're handling something complex, high security, PT standards, or accommodations. And that process could take 9 months to 12 months through reoccurring training and upskill training. And so you come in initially proctoring what we'd call more basic, less high stakes PT. You might think of something lower stakes like a pre-algebra exam, and then they work their way up. And as they show proficiency and they show they're doing their proctor error reports right, their CSAT reports right, tool utilization right, then after a certain amount of tenure, time, and grade, if you will, then you move up to a level 2 and a level 3 and a level pro, where you'll start to get more high stakes things in tenure. And that requires another set of reoccurring training and another set of career pathing, because we don't want to move anyone up too fast unless the output and the outcome and the KPIs are proving they are proficient. And then we continue to monitor that every month to say, are they continuously maintaining that standard? Are they ready to move up, or do they need to go back to remediation?
Just another point, there's also, for a test center scenario, there's a roster, so they would know that Corey's coming in, and here's the special accommodation already prior approved for Corey, for example. So there's the rostering part that, essentially makes it to where we know exactly who's coming in, what they need, and that all would have been pre-discussed with the California Bar on those specifics. And
okay, and sorry, I think I just have two or three more. How is the company protecting against data breaches and protecting the test takers' information and biometrics that are being collected when they're taking these exams?
Sure, I'll discuss that one. Within our operations and within our network, I mean, we have Falcon Agent, we have it's encrypted at rest. We're on AWS servers. We have some of the most stringent kind of security requirements in place for our actual data. So, as an example, the data protection framework where, because I want to also validate this with you, where you can actually see a document evaluates that, because that's actual data that's even going right across locations into the EU, which they have some of the most stringent protections around their data. So that's actually a really great kind of certification or document that demonstrates the level of rigidity of those security requirements that we have built around the system, as well as ongoing monitoring from operations and security teams of any intrusions, any potential disruption at all. So we're immediately identified if those are in place, and they're taken care of.
And then
for the benefit of this committee, there's one slide that provides a list of protocols that they have to comply with. So, for example, CCPA, which I'm pretty familiar with, GDPR, those are very stringent and very restrictive compliance. And so, to the extent any member is interested about the rules and the rigidity of those protocols, by all means, reach out to me or the staff. I'm sure you guys will also be able to provide additional information.
Great. And then one last question. I was wondering what the company's policy is on utilizing students' data. I know that that's kind of been a big question, a big concern when looking at a lot of these, testing proctoring programs and companies, is where is their data going and what is it being used for? So I was wondering if you had kind of a quick rundown. I went through the privacy policy and there were some, references to using personal identifiers, online identifiers, IPs under the CCPA for sale. So I wanted to see what that looks like. And I know there's an opt-out option, but is there an option that we can opt out automatically for all of our students, or is that something that has to be done on an individual basis?
So for the actual testing experience that your students or test takers will go through, we do not sell any data. We do not, it's used specifically for testing purposes, right? So that includes all PII, that includes any, we discuss the audio and video recordings and all that information, but any information that they input into our system cannot be sold. We don't use it for training. We don't use it for anything. So we have a very hard stance against that. The only information that we're collecting or utilizing is for testing purposes. So for instance, we do discuss IP address. That actually is often used for, Corey addressed kind of the really robust and comprehensive exam security, and that is used for their process. If we see somebody that it looks like they're testing from a different location, he went into a level of detail, but that's really a large part of why we collect IP.
Thank you.
And hey, this is Robbie. Can I just ask one more quick?
Yes.
The thing that kind of concerned me was the idea of giving the bar exam in July 2 times over 4 days. And now listening to this presentation, it sounds like the reason for that is measured learning doesn't have the ability to accommodate test takers all at once over 2 days. So this is really for Becky and Audrey. I feel like the number of in-person test takers is a lot smaller than they think. I'm guessing it was going to be 10%.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right, Rob. I don't mean to speak over you, and I know we're running short. It's our forecast that we gave to them, not knowing how many people will preference in person. If we said 100% remote, or even 10%, I think that would change it. So, and that is something we're already getting a little preliminary info from that November 8th and 9th. We have about 15% of people asking to test in person. Again, that's not this exact same pool, but we also are going to be learning about our estimates and our forecasts. We just want to make sure the applicants know they can preference in-person testing if that's what they want, but it might land where the balance would be that we wouldn't have to do 2 forms of the test.
Well, what I want to know, I guess, is because I don't like that idea, can measure learning administer in person in a 2-day exam, no matter how many say they want it? Can they do it? If we don't like that 4-day, 2 different tests, can they do it? Can they rent space and make it happen? Sean?
Yeah, we definitely have a pop-up solution, and we've done thousands of test takers and huge admins with the right amount of notification and a good forecast. There's endless possibilities. We just would need to know what those estimates are now and what that change would look like, and if we're all comfortable with that.
So Sean, let me just give you some parameters. To play around. For the July bar exam, we typically have between 7,000 to 8,000 applicants. And for the February bar exam, at least based on the statistics that were released for the last February exam, we have about 4,000 applicants. So with those parameters, what's the capacity limits?
Yeah, even at 15%, you're talking 714.50. I don't think we'd have a major issue with that. I just have to run the numbers, check with the vendors, make sure the current space is available. because the venues in California are unique, right? They are booked out in advance. I just have to make sure that if we've locked down the dates and we have, and we want to change the capacity requirements, I'll go do a capacity analysis and come back. But Alex, to directly answer your question, with notice, all these things are possible. If we want to switch to that, we need to do it sooner than later, and we'll get ready for it.
And there's a big difference between 30% test center and 10. So just in terms of the volume. So if you lock in and say, listen, we're only going to allow 10%, then that also obviously is an important parameter here to help us figure that out.
Yeah.
So folks,
we're
I know
working with my estimates. So.
Yeah. Hey, folks, I know we're running out of time. I do have a couple of questions. I'm just looking for really quick answers, not looking for anything detailed, because I want to make sure we have enough time for the community to debate and then to vote on this. First question, how many live proctors do you have if we were to have 7,000 applicants taking the exam?
Yeah, so right around 2,000 on the proctoring staff. I mentioned technicians, intervention specialists. That's kind of inclusive of all of that. So 2,000.
Let's not include technicians because I have a separate questions on technicians. So just on live proctors, how many do you have?
Sean, double check. I think it's 1,500. I want to say that's the number.
Great. Yeah. Now let's talk about technicians on the test day. How many technicians would you have available?
So it does depend on the It does depend on the volume, but any given day, I think we have about 150 technicians that can be scheduled.
Okay. How many test centers do you have in California?
54 right now.
And this is all over from Northern and Southern California? And
All
would you say
right now is 54.
Yeah, we have 34, but then we scale it up with our pop-ups.
Okay, sorry, 34.
Would you have more test centers in the Northern or Southern California, or they have equal number of test centers?
I'd have to pull that.
Danielle, I can't remember the split by geography, and Zach, I think, had trouble getting back in.
We would have to pull that.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
we were planning on quite a bit of pop-ups, Alex, because the volume we've received for this plan hasn't come to us city specific. Mm-hmm. And so as we get that city specific, we were planning on pop-up sites in addition to being ready. Once we get city specific, then we're going to line up all of those logistics. Sorry for the long answer. I know you're in a hurry.
No worries. Let's talk about high-stake exams. How many high-stake exams have you guys administered where the number of applicants exceeds 7,000 or 8,000 applicants?
Oh, a lot. Ashley, you might want to take this one. A lot. We have one high-stakes exam partner that does 22,000 a day.
Which one is it?
Ashley, you're good, but you want to cover that? You want to share? I don't know you go ahead.
So, yes, we have, I think at our height, we are administering about, now it's high stakes over 3 of their main programs, 3 of their main high stakes examinations. They're about 20,000 a day.
So which exam is this? I missed it.
The TOEFL, GRE.
GRE. Okay, got it.
They have another high stakes licensure exam we administer as well for teacher licensure.
Got it. One more question. So my understanding is human proctoring always has inherent limitations. And I say this because now software, and we did this through ExamSoft, software can, they can track your eye movement for questionable behaviors that may not always be easily detectable by human, especially where you already mentioned your ratio is 3.5 or even 4 applicants to 1 proctor. And so you don't have a proctor that's constantly staring at the same applicant, right, for the entire duration of the exam. And so how do you address this, how do you make sure that the proctor is actually tracking the right stuff? Because I certainly have read stuff online where applicants, they have literally put notes and stick notes onto their screen. And so, from the human perspective, the applicant is really looking at the exam, but you just don't know they're actually reading off of their notes on the screen. And so how do you address that situation?
Yeah, so I mentioned monitor inspection. That's kind of a deterrent there. So we do a reflective surface to actually look at the physical computer. Because to your point, if I pick my laptop up, you're never seeing my keyboard or my screen. And so we do a mobile cell phone selfie camera or a mirror to see the actual physical computer. And then we're also making sure that nothing else is within reach. And so that exact threat would be mitigated there. Back to your point earlier, though. So imagine you have 4 people on your screen. You are kind of looking. There are always eyes on glass, and there's always the screen up. Cheating behavior typically isn't a one-time event though. The entire exam, likely they're going to be doing whatever infraction. So maybe I missed you glancing off screen for one time, but I'm not going to miss it the 50 times that you actually are doing it. So that's where our humans are, they're going to watch Sean for a little bit, watch Neil for a little bit, watch Danielle for a little bit, get a pattern, recognize what that individual does and doesn't do, and that's going to help them just distinguish any odd behavior.
But we have a lunch break. So are you saying you would track what's on their keyboard and the surrounding at lunch break as well, or after lunch break? That is
So we
fun.
would definitely check back in. Whenever we lose sight of the test taker, break or otherwise, we will do a recheck-in process. We're going to rescan the room, redo monitor inspection, recheck their ID, make sure that they get back in as normal. It's kind of like we're starting over.
And this is part of the responsibility of the human proctor. Is that correct?
And the system itself too. So there's kind of a pre-check process. So if you probably haven't seen it, but there's screens to go through and they can take their own photos. So there's that component, but yes, the human proctor will not unlock that exam until we are sufficiently that that's the right person and then their environment is secure.
Final question, since you talk about photo, how do you ensure that the applicant is not giving you a falsified photo ID? Because obviously in one of your models, I can literally just show you my ID, but how do you confirm and verify that is indeed my ID?
So it is human verified. So for example, passport. So we're checking the name to ensure it matches, checking, make sure it's not expired, also doing a photo match. And so we actually can turn on a feature to do a biometric photo match, but often that's not on. That plus the eligibility and plus, then later if some questionable scores or questionable behavior, that video is available for everyone to go who's authorized to see that candidate. And so we can go and say, actually, that's not Corey. We can see his ID is manipulated. So it's a big deterrent on the front end, but then there's a ton of other items that are essentially help us find if that person is not who they say they are.
Got it. I don't have any questions. I know, Audrey, we're running out of time unless there's any.
Oh, no, I think Justice Macy Weller had a hand raised, but.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please.
I think it might be because she was going to call for the vote.
Oh, well, so unless we have any additional questions, thank you, Mr. Looning. I know you guys have a busy day, but thank you for speaking with us.
Thank you for the opportunity. Nice to meet everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Thank you. Colleagues, I know we have 8 minutes left. This is really a good time to look at the resolution, and I will let Audrey take it on. But we do have a resolution and the staff can read through the resolution, which is quite long, by the way. And then once we have that read, we can, open up for discussion, debate it, and then ultimately vote on it.
It is quite long, so hopefully everyone read it. And part of the reason it's long is because we're not going to have minutes from this meeting until we have our next meeting. So we wanted to include everything here in the resolution. So hopefully you've read through all the whereas clauses, and we can move to the resolution. Do you want me to sort of summarize it? Everyone can see my screen, I believe.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So section 1, the Kaplan drafted multiple choice questions. Section 2, measure learning. And then section 3, the exam consisting of the multiple choice questions. What those 200 multiple choice questions will cover. Those are the same 7 subjects. And then the delivery remotely or in person at vendor run or state bar run test centers.
I'll note that the
I'm sorry, I missed section 4. And then that the CBE directs staff to seek those appropriate approvals from the Supreme Court. Go ahead, Paul. Sorry.
Yeah, and what you asked the court to approve in the before this was a very generic rule that just says we decide, the bar exam's going to be in February and July. It's removed the MCBE requirement, but leaves everything else up to the bar. So one question I have is, I'm glad that the court decided that we needed to be more involved in this process and actually give our approval as opposed to just receive reports about what staff was up to. I'm wondering if we're going to continue that process going forward, or if we're just going to slip back into old habits once we get the court's blessing. I hope we're not going to slip back into old habits. You all can imagine what I would say about that because I've said similar words so many times in the past. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Paul.
And Paul, I can assure you as a new chair, I will make sure, we work with the State Bar closely on all of these key issues. And I'm always constantly in touch with the board to make sure that, we get to give them, the necessary vetting or the due diligence that they need to make their decisions as well. Any comments on the resolution in front of us? Hearing none.
I'm gonna reluctantly vote for it. I'm very reluctant. I am nervous about whether we're effectively changing the cut score by not giving ourselves the opportunity to calibrate the new questions against the old ones. But things have been allowed to go on for too long, deficits that have painted ourselves into a corner, and we have to move forward with something else. I hope that we can eliminate the 2 sets of questions for July, because that's really putting a burden on the questions bank in the long term, and seems unnecessary. But I guess I understand that they're being very careful so that we don't have a problem until we better understand how the market's going to choose between in-person and remote exams. So I will reluctantly make the motion for purposes of discussion.
I'll second it, Scream.
Okay, we have Paul Kramer calling for the motion, and then we have Mr. Kungora seconding the motion. Any discussion or debate? And I can, start out by saying this is a really important decision, almost unprecedented. And I say this because there's a lot of key issues involved, and it takes a lot of time to fully vet each issue. But I do find comfort, at least from speaking with the Measure Learning today, that they, may have some limited capacity issue, but I do find comfort that we can potentially, help them resolve those issues by, either adding additional day or find ways to make sure it goes smoothly. Now, that being said, the concern that I have remains to be, can we really do this? And so, I think it's important for me to reflect that, that they really get us involved, meaning the specifications, right? They're going to have to get us involved, and also the staff and Audrey, to the extent possible. I would very much like at least some members of the CBE to be intimately involved in every step of the way, just so that we're not excluded from any discussion or any consideration of any, options or selections. And I don't know if that's possible, but I certainly would ask that, the staff consider that. We can create a task force with, all the key members, and we'll, have meetings occasionally on a weekly basis to make sure that we're, part of this process, to ensure that this process will be smooth.
And I would ask that we have progress reports at each of our meetings, December and January.
Well, I actually would like to have a progress report earlier than that. I don't want to wait until 3 months, or, obviously we have a meeting in a few weeks, but even then, we're going to need a lot more reports on progress than waiting until 2-3 months later to find out what has happened.
Yeah, no, I agree. But at a minimum, when we do meet, we should hear about it.
I think what I like saying, and which is totally possible, is maybe a new call for liaisons for this special project, and then at all of our CBE meetings, updating the full committee, just so the liaison not be the number that would have quorum for the meeting, but you understand all that, so we can work that out. I can do a new call for liaisons for this project.
Instead of liaison, I would open up to the entire CBE. Whoever wants to be involved, just send your name to Audrey, and so she can keep all of us involved. I think that would be the best.
That is the same thing I'm saying. I'm just saying we might have quorum issues, like the whole committee can't be involved, right? So anyway, that's just what I'm saying.
Okay. Any additional discussion, debate? Any member?
Me.
Yes, here from the LA office. Hello.
Please.
So I guess more of a practical question. I think my question is just how we got here. How did we get to the point where a contract had been signed with Kaplan without a vote? and I'd like to know kind of what that process looked like and how we avoid it in the future, so we aren't pushed into these situations where we have to determine whether or not we can administer an entire new bar in months.
I'm going to answer that very, very quickly because I know we might lose quorum in a second. The Committee of Bar Examiners doesn't approve contracts. So in April at the committee meeting, the committee voted to recommend to the Board of Trustees, who does approve contracts, to go with a new vendor for the multiple choice questions. And that's where we got to the contracting phase. And you can read all the materials that we had in terms of what we sent the court in the court's petition. There is a particular interpretation that we are now going to fill with this motion of the rule of court 9.6. And I think that was the issue between our petition and the Supreme Court's response to that. And that's why we're here with this meeting.
And I'll just jump in and say, I think we can put this on the agenda for the October meeting so we can have a better discussion of it, because it's an important question. And I want to make sure that we, can have that kind of conversation and at a meeting without cutting you off for it.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. I really am sorry to speak so quickly and to try to get through this as well.
No, yeah, we should definitely agendize that, because I think, even just functionally, we should, be really extra careful about what we're voting on.
And the October meeting is the start of the new year. So going over CDE roles and responsibilities, Board of Trustee roles, that's all wonderful for October.
Perfect.
All right, folks, I know we have a few folks who are about to leave, so I want to, get the call, at least take the roll on the votes. So unless there are additional comments or questions, I'll ask Devin to take the roll.
Dr. Bolton? Dr. Bolton? Robert Brody?
Yes.
Dr. Cow? Kareem Gangora?
Yes.
Larry Kaplan? Paul Kramer?
Yes.
Alex Lawrence?
Yes.
Esther Lynn? Justice Macy Walla?
Yes.
Bethany Peak? Bethany Peak? Ashley Silva Guzman?
Yes. Oh, there's Bethany.
And a yes from Bethany as well. Judge Reyna? Vince Reyes?
Yes.
Alan Yokelson?
Yes.
Alex Chan?
Yes.
And back to Dr. Bolton. With 10 yeses and 0 nos, the motion passes.
Thank you. Audrey, do we have any other business items? I know we don't have a closed session.
We don't have a closed session. That concludes the business items.
Thank you all. Thank you for your time. Enjoy your week.
Thank you.
The meeting is adjourned.